Well, hello everyone. It looks like it's about 9 o'clock and we can get started now. The class will probably run until 12 to 12:30. We have a lot of material to cover, but it's not rush. We'd rather inform everyone so that they know what they're doing on the accounting. I'm Rex Crandell, and my assistant Tamara Brown is also going to be teaching parts of the material. And we have a whole lot to cover with you today. Before we get started, I'd like to ask what your situation is in terms of why you're taking the class, and so that we can build it around your circumstances. So Jared, Rachel, Will, Ford, what is your situation so that we can build the class? Okay. Rachel, do you have your microphone on? I guess not. Okay. So let's go to Iris Lucky.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So my mom died in 2021. I was appointed administrator because she did not have a will or trust. I provided my attorney with a spreadsheet. He tells me this is no good.
Yeah.
So this is why I'm here.
Forget it. Your numbers aren't even close.
Well, I think my numbers were close. I mean, my numbers.
Iris, you're
format.
muted.
But the format is not even close, right?
Yeah, format. Yeah, the format is a bit tricky. And we're going to be teaching the class based on the judicial council forms, which are the ones approved by the courts. And we're going to show you another way to do it too with Excel spreadsheets. And we'll give you the comparison about, the two different types of formats. But we're going to cover a lot of material to get your format together.
Well, thank you.
And then Rachel, Will, and Jared, Ford, do you have your mic on now?
We do now. I realized that was me and not you. I do. Thank you. Yeah. And it's Garrett.
Garrett?
Garrett.
T is in Tango.
Correct.
Okay, Garrett.
Yeah, and he'll be in about an hour. His worker took him for a walk this morning.
Okay. Perhaps you could tell us about his circumstances so we can build the class around it.
Sure. So Garrett was born without disabilities, but he had an umbilical hernia and asthma. And at 6 months of age, on April 16th of 1988, he underwent an umbilical hernia repair. And the doctor made a math error when she repurposed the medication from a liquid to an IV suspense. And he was given 10 times the amount of medication he should have been given. He subsequently had a fever that went up to 108. He had a series of heart attacks, a series of strokes, and his second seizure lasted 4 hours and 32 minutes and 28 seconds. He then had hundreds of seizures a day for 6 years. He's had open heart surgery and 23 other surgeries to repair damage from that initial drug insult. So he's dramatically impaired. He's classed as nonverbal. He uses a wheelchair for mobility. He can no longer walk because the avascular necrosis that was caused by the drug overdose is too painful at this time.
So he's nonverbal, but his hearing is okay?
His hearing is fine, and he actually has about 250 words. I've created what's called an expressive dictionary that uses his word approximations, so people who work with him regularly can understand his language. He has home sign, but because of limited use of the right side of his body, he doesn't use ASL.
Okay, so
and we use a communication book.
who is appointed his conservator?
So his
Rachel
father,
or Will?
both of us, we are co-conservators, and we are considering adding my niece, who would be their guardian, the boys, both our sons' guardians, should we pass away unexpectedly. She is listed as a guardian, but she is not listed as a conservator yet. She's
Okay,
an adult in her 30s. She's a principal at a elementary school in San Jose.
yeah. Okay, so we have Jarrett with disabilities and he's
Mhm.
under conservatorship, and
Yes.
does he have any assets?
He has a number of assets, although we could not sue the military because my husband was active duty at the time. We filed an administrative claim, so Garrett has a trust, and we get a stipend from that each month to pay for his care. And
Okay,
then he gets a check that goes into his conservator savings account each month that pays for hygiene products and other incidentals.
okay. I don't normally see a trust combined with a conservatorship. That brings up some interesting questions. But thank you. Now I got a better idea. And Iris Lucky, when is your accounting due?
Well, we're waiting for, well, I don't know, actually.
Okay,
Um,
so you
well,
should,
we're not in finalization because we're waiting for the California State unclaimed properties, which is 6 months behind. So I say maybe by June, but I've never given any accounting and I've been.
okay. So you're supposed to give an accounting on a probate case 1 year from your appointment, getting your letters.
Oh, well, see, no one ever told me that. My attorney didn't tell me that.
Has it been more than 1 year?
Yes. My mom died on the 21st of November. I was appointed administrator on December 21st.
Okay. So it looks like you need to do an accounting now, it appears to me. And anyway, that's the way it works is you have to file, we'll show you in here, you have to file an inventory and appraisal 90 days after appointment. And that tells the court what assets you have under management. And then after 1 year, you have to do another accounting. And it's generally each 2 years after that, you have to follow up, but your probate's not going to be going that long, but the conservatorships will be. So for conservatorships, you've got the inventory appraisal 90 days after appointment. Then the first accounting in 1 year, and for the conservators and guardians, every other year. So years 1, 3, 5, and 7, you have to turn in accounting. Okay, well, that's good to know, and you'll need to talk to your attorney about that. Now, Pat Berkowitz, I know a little bit about your case, but could you explain your circumstances so we can help build a class around? I think you took the class once before, if I recall.
I did, Rex, and it was a very good class, and there's so much. And it did go a little fast for me, so I'm taking it again. I have some specific questions now in terms of, for example, we're supposed to keep track of our time. Is there a program for us to do that? I just keep it on my calendar, the time that I spent.
We use QuickBooks.
QuickBooks?
Yes.
Is that the QuickBooks Online or just the regular QuickBook?
I don't know anything about QuickBooks Online.
Okay, so it's the other QuickBook.
But basically, there's a timer function.
Okay,
And
that's helpful.
a
And
time
then
and a billing, because you're probably going to be billing like
yes,
75 an hour or something.
yes, that's what I'm billing.
So yeah, QuickBooks is a time feature. There are others, but it works
think
good at
QuickBooks is
start and
good.
stop. It's real fine.
And then I also got the program from you for the accounting from you that
The Excel spreadsheet that we sell.
is it okay, yeah. And I was having problems using it because I don't have, I'm not good at these things, and there are no instructions on how to use it. So I thought I should spend some more
Okay,
time.
let me ask you this.
Mhm.
On that, the software that you received from us, do you know how to use Excel?
No.
Okay. I suggest you look at a few introductory videos on YouTube
Okay.
and
Okay.
specifically on Beginner's Guide to Excel. It's not
Okay.
that,
Great.
there's not that many pieces to it.
Mhm.
But you'll need to learn how to do columns and adding and there's a lot to it. Don't think, don't divert and spend a PhD on Excel, but just get enough to make columns and adding and it
Okay.
should be okay for you.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
and so you can use Excel. You can also use the judicial council forms that we're going to be teaching from today. So the other somewhat student supervisor, that's my laptop. And when Tamara's teaching, I'll probably be on that. So it's not a real person.
Okay.
So,
Rex, my
yes.
husband Will is here. I was just gonna let him say hello to you.
Hello.
Hello, Will. You can hide out over there as long as you can hear.
He can, he works from home also. So I took the day off, but he's doing some things, so he'll be
Oh, okay. Well,
double tasking while we're doing this. He'll
all
stop
right.
if he has questions.
Yeah. And
We're pretty familiar, but yeah.
Pat had said that the class goes fast the last time she took it, which is true. I also point out for those, to learn more and go through it again, we have a YouTube channel that the class is on and from prior classes. And the YouTube channel is called Estate Planning California, Rex Crandell. And you can watch a different class that we've done in the past and for review. And also we have about 40 other videos on estate planning topics that might be of interest. So court accounting. Some people do it because they have to. For guardianship, conservatorship, they have to. For probate, you have to. For trusts, you don't actually have to do this accounting. It's a good idea to.
So we've been required by the court, Garrett's in his 30s now. We've been required to do the accounting on the conservatorship side that documents monies we spend on his behalf from his account.
Right.
But we have not been required to do anything that we spend for our other son or for ourselves through the trust, just for the conservatorship.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was saying is guardians and conservators do have to do an accounting. So do executors, administrators, and certain people under certain powers of attorney have to do accounting. And there's no license required if you were to offer that service to someone else. You don't have to be an attorney, a CPA, enrolled agent, anything like that. You can do court accounting as a service, bookkeeping. And you do the accounting and you get the whole report done, and then you file a petition for approval of your accounting from the judge. And the probate examiners, they're the assistants in the court, assistants to the judge, will review your accounting and make comments. And then there's other things we're going to show you how to what the petition looks like during the class. And then your court accounting is approved by the judge. And at that time, if there are other beneficiaries or anyone else who might contest your accounting, they're cut off from being able to make any objections, because you have to give them notice. Good morning, Tamara. So you don't, for guardianships, conservatorships, and probate, you're required to do the accounting, optional for trusts. But for trusts, you can bring your accounting to the court to get it approved, but it's optional. And some trustees do that because it cuts off liability from any of the beneficiaries to claim, because the process is you have to give legal notice that you're going to get your accounting approved. They have so many days to object if they didn't like what it says. And then after the hearing and it's approved, they lose their right to object from that point forward.
Right. So we have two trusts. We have our family trust that holds all of our assets. Garrett has a separate trust that is held and managed by a fiduciary agent in Florida, and they handle all of those trust questions for us. They are responsible for
Yeah, and
his
since you have an
finances.
independent trustee, it
Yeah.
does not appear that the court would require you to do an accounting on the trust, but I would probably disclose that in the accounting that the trust exists and the circumstances.
Yeah,
because it-
we did. We had to initially submit the actual trust document.
okay. Good. Another thing about court accounting is it's unusual. So by that, I mean, I'm a CPA, an attorney, a real estate broker, all kinds of things, but in accounting school, not one word about court accounting was ever said. Nothing. It's a specialty. It evolved out of the probate code, and our California version is a little bit different than other states. But the reason I'm saying that is if you hire a service provider, you cannot be certain that they know what they're doing, even if they say they do, because it has to be in a certain format. And let's say you hire a CPA firm and they say, oh yeah, we know how to do that, or a tax person. And you pay for the service, you turn in the court, and the court says, this isn't even close. Now you have to get it done by someone else, and the court's going to want you to pay out of your pocket for that first time. So it's just a specialty.
So it doesn't come out of the estate then? I would have to pay for it myself?
Yes. If you hired somebody that didn't know what they're doing, that failed on everything, yes.
But if I hired somebody like you, would it come out of my pocket or the estate?
Oh, everything to do that directly benefits the estate or the conservator or the ward, conservatee, is paid for out of that estate. So you have a probate estate, and all your administrative costs, nothing should be paid directly by you without reimbursement. And so let's say you had to pay a court filing fee, $450 out of your own pocket. Well, you should be reimbursed for that from the estate.
Okay.
The only reason that usually where a fiduciary, trustee, conservator has to pay out of their own pocket is for bad judgment or mistakes, or when they breach fiduciary duty. We see them sometimes where a trustee or conservator gets carried away and decides to spend the money for their own personal benefit, and then it's all personal liability at that time. So yeah, just keep good records. You don't have to turn in the receipts with your accounting unless asked, but always keep original bank statements, because you're going to have to turn them in. And I would try to get paper bank statements, not electronic only. Because when you turn in your accounting, you're supposed to turn in all your bank statements, and if you have investment accounts, you're supposed to turn in all original statements from the vendor. And if you did print them off online, there's procedures to get a bank to stamp it that shows it's official. Okay, so did everybody get the material for the class?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. So what we're going to work in most of, it says number 1 handout, we're going to be covering that in great detail. And then we have other forms that I'll just explain what they are. 2, we're going to come back to this later, but this is an example of an Excel accounting, which I'm not going to discuss at this moment. And then
Ready for me? I'm ready. I want
okay,
to get started.
okay. And then I have another handout, number 3, and this is the non-follow along, and it's got all kinds of training material in it that I have assembled and gotten from court websites, and these are code sections from the probate code. And then the last item that we have for you is an evaluation, and we appreciate it if you would take a couple minutes and give us feedback. We do this class as volunteer with the Contra Costa County Law Library, and oftentimes our course evaluations are given to the judge. But at this point, I'm going to bring Tamara in, and she'll be here.
Hi, all. Good morning. I am going
Good
to start
morning,
by going through an inventory and appraisal. So we are actually going to start here on this screen. The inventory and appraisal will be one of the first things that needs to be done after letters are obtained. You will need to do an inventory and appraisal, whether it's a decedent's estate, a conservator's estate, or a guardianship case. So I will tell you that the inventory and appraisal is very important. I myself do reviews of accountings and do a bunch of accountings myself for people. Just by the way, my name is Tamara. I am a licensed or registered LDA in Contra Costa County and in Napa County, and I do a lot of conservatorships and probate. I currently work for probably about 7 different attorneys or law firms, and also help propers. So and I assist Rex here, and we've been teaching this. I'm sure he's went over along. We've been teaching the class, and typically when an accounting, say for instance, somebody tries like a proper or somebody tries to do an accounting and they have a hard time, the first thing I'm going to ask for, if I'm doing the review independently, and again, I'll leave my contact information a little bit later, but if I'm doing an accounting and reviewing it independently, the first thing I'm going to ask for is this inventory and appraisal. A lot of times your inventory and appraisal is wrong, and therefore that is the reason for your mistakes in doing an accounting. If your inventory and appraisal is wrong, nothing in your accounting will match. You won't get it to work at all. So it's really, this is one of the really important documents, and we'll go through why it's important and why you need it. And so our example here, I always try to state, is given that it's filled out by an attorney, but I'm going to go through how you would fill this out yourself as a proper, so that you can get the information. So a lot of times we refer to forms and their numbers. In this case, it would be DE 160. You really would only hear that coming from the court or the probate examiners. That means decedent's estate. So basically, if it was a probate, then of course they would refer to it as the DE 160. But if it is a guardianship or a conservatorship, they'll refer to it as the GC 040. So this is the reason for the form. So if, for instance, you are pro per, you get tentative rulings from a probate examiner, or an examiner at all, they will refer to these form numbers DE 160, GC 040, and really they're referring to the inventory and appraisal form. So again, this will be completely blank up top here. You would put your name, whoever is the administrator for a decedent's estate, whoever is the conservator for a conservatorship, or whoever is the guardian for a minor. So you will put,
Excuse me,
yes,
are you meaning to show this on the screen?
yes,
or-
is it not showing?
No, I have some beautiful Hawaiian flowers.
Okay, I'm on the wrong screen. Sorry. Can you see
That's
it now?
okay. Yes, thank you so much.
Sorry. So again, let me go back to, it's referring to these numbers, DE 160 or the GC 040. So I'll start over. This will, this is where you will put the name, your name and your address, your telephone number. Fax is optional. Most of the time people don't have really faxes anymore. But what is really important is to put your email address. I know I've had a lot of people say, well, I don't want to give my email address. Really what happens is if the probate examiners or somebody wants to contact you, this is really what they're going to look for to contact you. So it's always nice to put an email address you wish to be contacted. Down here in the attorney for, this will be your name. So say I'm David Lowry and I'm completing this. I would have my name up here, David Lowry, 1602 Financial Center. And then down here, I will put my own name again, and I will state either a conservator. I will state if it's a decedent's estate proper. If it's a guardianship, I also would usually use the words proper, and that's PRO space PER. Basically, that means you're representing yourself. Down here, you will put the county you are in. Let's use Contra Costa for example. It could be Contra Costa, could be Alameda, could be Solano, could be Sonoma. I do these for down south in Los Angeles. So you would just put the court and the street address along with the mailing address. And this is pretty self-explanatory. The branch name, a lot of times, like for instance, Contra Costa has 3 or 4 four courthouses in Contra Costa. If there's time where like you don't know what the branch name is, typically I would just put probate department. Then they'll know where to send the copy. Nowadays they're all e-file except for propers. Okay, down here, estate of, that doesn't, it really means the money of or assets of. So right here in this case, it would be who the conservatee is. If it's a decedent, it would be the person who passed away. If it is a minor, it will be, of course, the minor. A lot of times what I also add in here is I will put in parentheses and an AKA. So if Jeannie had an AKA and maybe she went by Jean, or maybe she went by another name that isn't exactly this name, I will put in here AKA. A lot of times also, let's say you have a decedent's estate and it is a married name, but a lot of times she went by the maiden name. So I would put, like, for instance, Leanie Lowry, Jeannie Lowry, AKA Jeannie, say Brown or something like that. Okay, you will mark the box dependent upon what your case is. So if you're in probate, it would be a decedent. If it's a conservatorship, it would be conservatee. Again, if it's a minor, you would put minor. Moving down to the form, again, this is your inventory and appraisal. Most of the time you will be marking the inventory and appraisal in final. The only time you really would do a partial would be, say, for instance, you wanted to get something filed right away, but you kind of think there might be some property in another state and you haven't been able to marshal that yet, or there could be several other reasons for a partial, but just remember, if you do mark your first one a partial, you really cannot do your accounting until you have one that's final. So you would have a partial and then the next one being a final. Now, there's two different ways to do this, really. A lot of times, like a law firm, if you have a partial, so if I did a partial and put it on here and then a final later, a lot of times the partial would include the first or the assets you found originally, and then a final would include kind of everything we found after a fact. I myself don't like to do that. I like my final to be a complete one, but I think the courts take them both. A corrected one would be, and this, I use this often, if somebody has turned in a final inventory and appraisal, and I find that that inventory and appraisal is not accurate, I will tell them they need to file a corrected one to include the accurate data, and we'll go into ways or how I determine an inventory and appraisal is inaccurate or needs correcting. Then you also have a reappraisal for sale. Most of the time this is for a decedent's estate. What happens is, and again, this inventory and appraisal will be done on date of death value, and we'll get into that over here. So say for instance, Jeannie, we'll use this example, passed away on March 8th, 2012, and right now we're in 2023. So this inventory and appraisal that I turn in will give values as of the date of death. But now I want to tell the court that I want to sell, say she had real property, and I want to sell real property. I would have to get a reappraisal for sale so that a probate referee could value the property as of today and not as of 2012. Okay, so that is these.
I'm sorry, I have another question. Is that okay if I ask at this time?
Absolutely, hon.
The reappraisal for sale, that's only for real property, not vehicles, not art, not anything else, simply real estate and real property. Am I correct?
Yes and no. It could be, I'm not saying that maybe you wouldn't want to do it for, say, for instance, art. It depends on when a probate referee is valuing the property.
Mhm.
I don't know specifically with like art, if they would
Okay.
be able to tell what the value was on in 2012. They might only be able to tell what the value is today. And so the value they give is probably today's, what they feel today's value is. There are certain things that it would be very difficult to value.
Correct.
Like say, even if I used, for instance, like a horse or some goats, like, how do you know the difference from the value in 2012 to the value today? Although
I would have talked to someone who handled those items at that time. But I'm also thinking of, with Garrett, he uses a wheelchair accessible vehicle.
uh-huh,
We sold one since our last accounting. And well, we didn't. We sold my husband's truck. My husband assumed ownership of the first vehicle, and we purchased Garrett a new vehicle. Should we have done a reappraisal for sale at that time?
no, you would just explain it in your accounting
Okay,
for
perfect.
vehicles.
Thank you so much.
We're talking more or less, it's typically only for real property, and a lot of times that being, if you don't have full authority, and that's getting into your petition for probate. Say for instance, the court only gave limited authority because maybe you couldn't bond or for whatever reason being, and we're talking more a decedent's estate, but there's only limited authority, and you need to sell a house. To be able to sell that house, you have to go in front of the judge, and the judge actually conducts the sale of the property. So a reappraisal for sale allows the judge to know what the value of the property is as of today, so that he knows if somebody comes in, say for instance, a probate referee values the property at $1 million, and somebody comes in with a sales contract and they're trying to purchase the house for 700,000. Likely a judge is going to go, no, that's not a valid, come to me with something more real than, 700,000 when the value of the property is $1 million. So it allows, because a judge does not know values of real property, it allows him to know if this contract is really even in the ballpark.
Okay, I got a question.
Yes, hon.
So we had the referee came out. She ended up having to correct the value of the house because the house was in bad shape. But we didn't have a reappraisal for sale. My attorney didn't tell me to do one. So the house is sold.
Well, if you have,
It sold for like $3,000 reappraisal. Not the reappraisal, but that corrected appraisal. So I'm really confused now.
okay, hun. So you really only need a reappraisal if the if you're going.
And she likes
I may have to mute somebody because I'm hearing somebody in the background. Sorry. The reappraisal really is only needed if the court is conducting, has to approve the sale. And
Okay.
what that means, hun, is say, for instance, you have limited authority and you need court approval for sale. What happens is you do a petition in front of the court saying you have a valid sales contract right in front of you.
Okay.
And the court issues a court date, and you actually go in front of the judge, show him the contract you have for a certain sales price, and it has to be published in a newspaper, and other people can come bid on that property if they wish to. And so in front of the judge, it's almost like an auction. The judge will go, okay, we have a valid sales contract for 900,000. Does anybody wish to overbid? And I've been there many a times where people will stand up and say, yes, I do. And then the judge actually conducts an auction right there. And the house is sold based on the judge's decision and order. It's not based on, it's not a private sale where you do
Okay.
the sale yourself outside the presence of the court.
Okay, all right.
That's the only real reason for the
Okay,
reappraisal.
all right, thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on. We're gonna complete this form. You will have a case number given to you the day you filed your first paper, so you will know the case number. And we're gonna get to a very important box, which is this box right here. So this box says the date of death of a decedent. So again, if you're in probate, mark this decedent. This date will be the day of death. Or it's the appointment of the guardian or conservator, the state. So it's the day you were appointed, the conservator or the guardian. Now, this can get a tiny bit confusing, and this is why this date is the #1 date why I have most people that I work with change, because the date right here, which is very important, is so a lot of times for a conservatorship, you will first apply for a temporary conservatorship, because most of the time a real permanent conservatorship can take, because of all the forms and all that's needed, can take months later, right? So in the meantime, what they call like an emergency or temporary conservatorship is obtained by somebody. Let's say it's an older person and you found out you need to move them to a care home. Most of the time, the care home's going to require a conservatorship, especially if the person is like borderline on dementia or has trouble with certain functions. They'll want a conservatorship for you to make the decision that they do go into this home. So a lot of times you'll quickly obtain a temporary conservatorship. Now, this could be several dates, and it's really important you realize what date you're putting in here. So if you're doing a temporary conservatorship and you're hearing when the court approves, you go to your hearing and say it's January 19th, and the judge says, okay, I'm ordering the temporary conservatorship. That date is the date you're now responsible. A lot of times, though, the judge will say, okay, but you also need a $20,000 bond. I'm just using any bond amount. It may take you a day or two to go get that bond. And then that bonding company has to file it with the court. And then later you'll get letters, your temporary letters. So you could get your temporary letters, let's say 5 days after the fact. Do not put the date you got your letters. It's the day the court ordered your hearing date, usually the conservatorship. So be careful on this date when you do this. That also runs for a permanent. Say, for instance, you decide you don't need the temporary, so you just apply for the permanent conservatorship. What would happen is the day that you're ordered, or the day the judge signs the order for a conservatorship, is the date you will use right here, because that's the day you're responsible for any thing that happens. And we'll talk the difference between, are you a conservator of the person only, which means medical decisions and stuff of that nature, or are you conservator of the estate, which means you handle only the finances, or you could be conservator of the estate and the person, which means you handle both the person and the assets. So just be careful on this date right here, and make sure the date you put is the date the order was signed. Now, the other thing that could be a little bit confusing, or I've seen, is say you get a temporary and, then you get your letters, and then the actual court date, which is typically about 2 months later for the permanent, sometimes a little bit longer if you need to have it continued because you couldn't get certain documents from medical providers, blah, blah, blah. It would be 2 months later, let's say you only need that permanent one, make sure, or no, I'm sorry, I'm talking, you have your temporary first, then your next hearing comes and you're ordered permanent. Make sure you don't put the day that you were ordered the permanent. It has to be the day you were first appointed by the court, for the conservatorship. Now, I will tell you, it's really important because you will run your accounting off this date right here. And if you have the wrong date, you're going to run an accounting that's completely wrong. And sometimes, depending upon the court examiners, depends on what county you're in, sometimes they will tell you, your accounting starts the wrong date, or sometimes their wording can be a little bit tricky, which means your accounting started the wrong date, and it's kind of difficult for you to figure that out. So a lot of times the reason the accountings are rejected are because of this date. So careful with it.
So we have both a conservatorship of the person, which we received when Garrett was 22. And then about 8 years later, we became conservatorship of the estate. So do we just use the conservatorship of the person date?
No,
Because
you would use the conservatorship of the estate. This really is all banking on finances. So if you were only the conservatorship of a person, you don't need to do an accounting. You only need to account for money. And so it would be only conservator of the estate, hon. So you'll use that date. You would not use the original one. Because you think about it, okay, and I'm gonna give you a real good reason on why you think about it. This is, an accounting is to prove to the court any other beneficiaries, heirs, whatever you wish to call them, how much money this person has, or what you're doing with this person's money. And so realize, when you're only a conservator of a person and you aren't managing that person's money, nobody cares. So you wouldn't tell the court what assets, really need to tell the court what assets this person has and blah, 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 when you're only the conservator of the person. That okay? Got it? Okay. So I'm going to move on to the appraisal part. Okay. So again, this is all blank on your form. There's numbers in here only for example purposes. So let's start with first one, which is attachment 1. So the total appraisal by the representative, that is you. You are the guardian, you are the conservator, you only complete attachment number 1. So what is attachment number 1? We're going to move the screen. So attachment number 1 will look like this. It's a simple form. It is what they call the DE, again, decedent's estate, DE 161, or if you're doing a guardianship conservatorship, it's the GC 041. Just 1 digit different than the inventory and appraisal. Up top here, you'll use the name of the person that's either the decedent or the conservatee, or the minor. Remember to carry forward the case number. It just ties this document if it should get separated from the other page. And you will need to include this number 1 because the form will be blank. Number 1 tells the court that this is everything that you have valued. Now, what do you put on attachment 1? Attachment 1 is cash and anything else cash equivalent. It does not include, which we will move to that separately on the next screen. It does not include personal property items, real property, vehicles, animals, art, anything that is non-cash. Again, let's be specific that attachment 1 is cash and cash only. So let's go through some items. I forgot to mention, you will also put up here page 1 of 1. So a lot of times when a conservatorship is happening, or even a decedent's estate, and we'll tell you I'm going through this right now, as my father passed away on Monday. So I'm having to do all this myself, and I'm going through it. It's it'll be a fun, interesting, but he has a trust, so I really don't have to go through this whole probate process. But I can tell you that I have been to the house and have begun cleaning the house so I could put it up for sale. And I did find a lot of cash. My father was 88 years old, and so they keep a lot of cash. Whereas a younger person, like, I never have cash on me. It's terrible. Never. We always use our card or our phone now, right? So if I was completing this for my father, I would say cash found at residence. I don't know, sometimes I don't like putting the actual address, maybe the city, but in this case they put the actual address. Especially if it's a conservatee, I would tend to shy away from putting the exact address, and especially if there's a whole bunch of cash, because I think that just leaves a conservatee a little bit vulnerable, especially if they kind of care for themselves a little bit, or if they're home alone. I don't know, I just don't like, so I kind of would complete this cash found at residence or conservatee's residence and leave out the actual address, but you're free to do whichever you wish. In this case, I am indicating to the court that the cash I found is $250. So I am stating the balance in the checking account. Please remember to only ever use the last 4 or 5 digits of an account number. Do not ever use the full account number, especially if you have a conservatee. If you do have a decedent's estate that you're completing this for, it's a little bit less risky because you've probably already told the bank that that person passed away already, and so that bank account has been frozen. But for a conservatee, this is their bank account. And if you put the entire account number, one, you'll probably get a pretty nasty note from the court that says you're not protecting, or you're not protecting the information of the conservatee, because this is public record. Anybody could go to the court and order a copy of this. And nowadays with online e-filing, a lot of courts, I do this for a lot of my attorneys, I can jump on and see anybody who's filed anything on this court case, and I can grab a copy of it. If I didn't have the best intentions in mind, I could do a lot with the information that's provided to me. So please don't ever put the full account number. The court doesn't need the full account number. There's no reason why they would have a full account number. So just list the last 4 or 5 digits. It allows them, because you have to turn in original bank statements, and we'll get to that later. It allows them just to make sure you're talking about the right account.
Question.
Yes, hon.
So the balance of the checking account, is that at the time of death?
I'm gonna get to that, sweetheart.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And that's okay. I'm right there. It's actually the next thing I'm gonna start talking about. So in this case, we're talking the bank name is this. I don't put the address of the bank, especially if you're talking Wells Fargo. Jesus, there's a million on it. They're on every corner. It doesn't matter what the address of the bank is. So I don't include that. Now your balance, that was a very important question asked. And I'm going to flip screens and show you one thing. That balance that I report must be the exact balance on this date that's in this box. Again, a lot of times I will tell you that a lot of people, and this is the number one mistake I see on inventory and appraisals and or accountings. And that's the reason why I asked for this. And I will do a little bit of like when I get these, say I'm reviewing them because somebody can't figure out something. First thing I'm going to look for is the day of appointment. Second thing I'm going to look for is the day they put here. Third thing I'm going to look for is to find the balance that they have reported on this page and make sure it is the balance on this exact date. Now, a lot of times the bank statements that you get, right? So let's say this is a decedent's estate or a conservatorship, March 8th. A lot of times when you look at the bank statements, you're going to look at it and say, how do I know what the balance was on this exact date, right? And so a lot of times people put the balance at the end of March. That's incorrect. That's why your accounting will not work. It must be the balance on March 8th. Now, a lot of times you can tell by looking at the bank statement because they'll put balances on the sides. A lot of times, if the bank does not do anything like that. And I want to say there's one, not sure if it's like Travis Credit Union or something. It's very difficult to find what is the balance on like a specific day. So in that case, I will ask the conservator or the administrator, executor, whatever the title is with a decedent's estate, to go to the bank and actually ask somebody at the bank, what was the balance on the day they got ordered responsible for money?
Okay, so my next question on that is, when a person, this was my mom that passed,
Yeah,
changed their account number. So
I'm sorry, what?
they changed the account number. So you
Right.
have to open up a totally different account.
Okay, right, because she passed away, so you could no longer use the actual account.
So
But
I don't have that account number for then. The only thing I have is the money that was pulled from that account at the time that I opened the new account. Is that going to work?
you're gonna have to do some explaining there. And it's very easy to explain, but you'll have to explain that, like, for instance, in your petition when you're asking for approval, because likely the new bank account statement that comes. So say, for instance, let's say you are ordered on March 8th to take care of somebody's account, right? Or you're ordered a administrator or a conservatorship. And on, let's say, March 20th, the bank decides close down the original account and open up a new account, because, and they do that for the purpose that when somebody passes away, you can no longer use that social security number. It's invalid. So you have to get a new tax ID number for the estate, because the estate now will have its own tax ID number. So the bank will then transfer the money to that new tax ID number. You're going to have to explain or somehow show or get the bank to provide you the information that shows the balance on the day of death, and then also showing that the bank transferred the amount what checks cashed in between, if at all, or if anything came in as income in between, if at all. And then you're gonna have to explain, and that's down when you get into the accounting, it's part of the accounting. You're gonna have to explain, and I'm trying to look at, it's on I don't see it in Rex's example, but it's a separate schedule that, you will need to show it on. That is the, changing of account, I can't think of the name right now, changing of the accounts. Hang on one second, I'll see if I can grab it for you. I don't do the accounting part, so I think it's called change of account value or change in form. Sorry, it's called change in form.
Okay.
It's a part of a schedule, and you're gonna have to show the court what you did. So you're gonna say, balance on this account on this date, and the bank transferred to this new account number on this date, and show the balance so they look exactly the same. The
Okay.
tricky part on that is gonna be, say for instance, you were ordered on March 8th and the bank, say they had automatic withdrawals or automatic payments, and there was a few things paid during that time period. You're still responsible for that. Even if you really didn't pay it, you're still responsible for reporting it. So let's say, for instance, person passed away on March 8th. On March 9th, PG&E automatically took out, I don't know, $200 for a PG&E bill because they're on auto pay. You're responsible and must report that $200 that happened the next day, even though you technically didn't pay it. You have to report it on the accounting. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Now, here's my next question. She died on the 21st of November. I didn't become administrator until the 21st of December.
Okay, you're only responsible for the day you became the administrator, the day you were ordered. I'm sorry, not letters, but the day you were ordered. So anything in between the day of passing and the day you became administrator, you do not report or account for.
Thank you.
Makes it a little bit easier, right?
does.
Right. You're not responsible for it. You're only responsible the day you were ordered.
Okay, thank you.
So
Okay.
we were not present in court. Our attorney did not ask us to be present or allow us to be present.
Okay.
When that accounting took place, is it the same day as the documents were filed? That is the only date I have.
Okay, hun, I didn't understand your question. You said you weren't in court.
We were not present when the conservatorship of the estate took place because our attorney said, don't be there.
Okay.
So I don't know what day he went to court. I know that the documents were filed on the 17th of the month because that's what my filing stamp says.
You will ask for a copy of the order. It's the conservatorship is a GC. I want to say it's 340, because I know letters on a conservatorship is a GC 350. So you would ask for, if you don't have a copy of the GC 340, which is the order.
340. Perfect. Thank you so much.
340. Yes.
Got it. Got it.
Quick
Thank
question.
you.
Another question.
Yes, hon.
And kind of going back to the inventory of appraisal, where you show the date of death or the appointment of guardian or conservatorship,
Uh-huh.
that needs to match the date that I became the administrator, or no?
That's correct. No, this is the, you have to give the day of death.
Okay, and then, because my administrator is a month later.
Correct.
Okay,
This
all right.
has to be date of death.
So they don't have to be the same. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna go, continue on, and, so we have balances now. In this account, there was also a savings account. Again, watch your account numbers. This is the balance on the, day of death or the day, I got appointed. There was a CD or a certificate of deposit in this case. I will indicate it and the amount. Now, in this case, and a lot of times this is for the older cases, you will have an uncashed pension check. A lot of times now they're direct deposited, so you really won't have checks. Be careful that if you state here an uncashed check from a pension, that it isn't an uncashed check that is dated very long ago and no longer valid, because it's really not cash. You have to go through a totally different something totally different for that. But in this case, it was dated right before I think this was a conservatorship right before, and so it's payable to the conservatee and the amount of it. It's just telling the court it's money that will be deposited in the estate or the conservatorship account. You also have Social Security. I know now Social Security really does do the direct deposits. So typically you won't find an uncashed check, but our example here is showing an uncashed check from Social Security. And then you have dividend checks. Sometimes they're on the dividend or investment accounts. You could have checks delivered to you every month, or you could have them reinvested to where they just go in and buy more stocks. So you would never see a check. So you won't always have this. Now, remember, this is an example of, say, I walked into somebody's house and they had all this. There are cases, many cases, to where I could do an inventory and appraisal and there is no cash. There's just none. A minor wouldn't have cash. You're not going to report anything. If that is the case, all I would do is put item 1, no cash assets, and 0 here. And my entire form would be done. So do not think you're going to find all these things. Don't think that you're going to you have to put these descriptions in 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. No, if you don't have it, you're not going to put anything here. You may only have a checking account. You may have a checking and a savings. You know, there could be many different scenarios. You may find a coin jar. I think I'd still list that as cash. And it's funny because, and I think of this because in my dad's house, yes, he kept many coffee cans of change. And if you think I'm going to stand there and count all that change to put it on his inventory and appraisal, I'm not going to do it. I'm probably just going to take a guess and then do a correction on my accounting. Okay, so moving on, we're going to get to the bottom of the form where you will either handwrite or type in. I don't know handwrite. I think these have to be typed. They cannot be handwritten, but you will have total cash assets at the bottom. And this number right here is the total of everything here. So again, if I have 0 cash, it will say 0. If I have $100 of cash, it will say $100. It is, again, the total on this form. This exact number will transfer over, and guess what? It matches that exact number there. Any questions on that part?
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
So is this through the whole probate?
No, honey, this is one day. The inventory and appraisal is only one day. We're not doing your accounting yet. Your accounting is for a period. This is only one day, and it's the day of appointment, the day of death, and that's it.
Okay, so my attorney did it and I'm looking at it. So there was some mutual funds at the time that we put on here. But there was, but
Go ahead.
beneficiary found out later. It took almost a year to find out there was a beneficiary. So that would not be included on there, correct?
That's correct. And the only thing you have to do really, there's two different things. You could file a corrected to remove it off, or you can bounce it out kind of in the accounting.
Okay, we'll bounce out in the accounting. Okay, all right.
Okay, so we're done with attachment 1. We've listed all of our cash assets. And the second thing we need to do is attachment 2. Now, if you have any non-cash assets, you would have reported that on your, let's say, DE 111 for a decedent's estate, or it's the GC, I want to say 111, and I'm not positive about that one. I can't think of the form, but I think it is for your petition for conservatorship, or it will be your DE 111, which is your petition for probate. You would have listed whether there was non-cash assets. Now on your order, the same number, which is the GC 140, if it's a decedent's estate, or your GC 340 if it's your guardianship conservatorship, on that order at the very, very bottom, right before the judge signs that order, they will issue a probate referee. They typically will only put in a name. Sometimes, if you're lucky, they'll put in the name and a phone number, and other times they'll put a stamp that tells you the business name, because you don't know how many times I've looked at an order and it just said Tamara Brown. That's it. And I'm going, okay, how do I know the contact information for this person? Where's her office? Where do I mail this to? What do I do with this? So I've had to do some internet searches, and what I would do is say Tamara Brown, probate referee for Contra Costa County or something, and typically my search will come up with an address and phone number to contact the probate referee, because you'll see why you'll need that a little bit later. But anyway, so attachment 2 is for the probate referee, right? I'm going to move to now attachment 2. Again, it will be a blank form. Again, it's the same one as the attachment 1. It is the DE 161 or the GC 041. It will have the name of the estate, or the decedent, or the conservatee, or the minor. It will have the case number. And instead of the attachment 1, you'll put attachment 2. You will put page numbers. And here you're going to get a little bit more descriptive. In this case, I'll show you an example that we had real property. You may not know this information. You may only know it's real property in the city of Newport Beach. You can easily look up the county, state of California. You may not know the legal description, described as lot 36, blah, 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 blah. If you don't know it, don't put it in. You may skip that and just say this property is commonly known as, and put the address of the property. Typically, you want to put as much information as you can get in for the probate referee, so he can verify he's actually valuing the proper property. You will also never put a value. That's not your job. That is the probate referee's job. So you will always leave that section blank. Now, in our example, we also have a vacation home. Again, real property described, 0 value. A lot of times I will put in household furniture and furnishings. And the address, you may want to put this for a conservatorship, especially if, say, for instance, they're going into a home, or something like that. Most of the time, household furniture and fixtures get very little value, although you may think there's a lot of value in the stuff. A probate referee and or a court does not. They're not going to go through and value all the screwdrivers, all the vacuums, nothing like that. They just don't do that. They give a lump sum. Typically, I'll see between $500 and $1,000. Kind of depending on the house size or depending on other things. If there is something in the house that you believe is of value, let's say a china cabinet that you just know that the person bought, or was handed down from grandfather to grandfather to grandfather, and you know it has value, list it separately. So if you have any like antiques or anything that is of value, you will put that down. Again, you also list cars. It is very important when you state the car. Do not just put, say for instance, 2011 Cadillac Escalator. I don't even know if they made those back then, but say I just put that. That's very difficult for a probate referee to give value. What they're going to ask is, what is the model? They're going to ask, what is the mileage? They're going to ask, is it running? They're going to ask, what basically is the cosmetic nature of it? Is it completely, you can't even open one of the doors, or is it pristine and doesn't have a scratch on it? Something like that will be a difference in value. So another example would be shares in a mutual fund. It is up to you to figure out how many shares, say for instance, and I'll just use my dad as an example. He's got stock at Morgan Stanley. I'm going to have to figure out every share of what stock he has. Now, in this case, this says 1425 shares of Safeguard investment. For Morgan Stanley, I would say go for me, in my case, a little bit further in that, say you state 1,000 shares of Apple, or a few 500 shares of Google, or and things of that, so they can give a value. We also have, in this case, 7 US savings bonds. And then we're going to get down to a diamond wedding ring. And it's 2 carats. Everybody laughs when I talk about this. Why is it important about a diamond ring? A lot of times, say for instance, and I'll give a perfect example. I had a client last month where one of the beneficiaries took the administrator to court because the administrator was also a relative, and her mother had stated that, and all the family knew, the mother had stated she had, I guess, 2 wedding rings, and there was, and let me tell you the difference, there was like a 2-carat one and a 5-carat ring, right? She wore the 5-carat, but she also wore occasionally the 2-carat, maybe when she didn't want people to see the 5-carat one. And it was told by the mother before she passed away to all the family that this one daughter could have the 2-carat ring as part of her inheritance to give to her son, which was a little bit grown up, so that he can hand it off to his wife or whatever. And later, as the administration went on, the administrator ended up confused and ended up giving her son the 5-carat ring. And then the other beneficiaries were mad because the value of a 2-carat and a 5-carat is extreme. And so they were mad. So she actually, and I don't know how this worked out, but had to go to her son, who had already given it to his fiance, get back the 5-carat, give him the 2, which I would not have wanted to be in that room at that time. And so she had to take back. So anyway, it's really important that you put things like this, because immediately from all the other beneficiaries, heirs, or people in or close to, whether it's a conservatee or a decedent, want what's due them, and they will fight you tooth and nail for what's due them. And if they think you have mismanaged the estate in any way whatsoever, they're instantly wanting to sue you. So I like to put every bit of information I have here. Let the probate referee value. You will leave everything blank here. You will have total non-cash assets that will be left blank. And what will happen is this will all be sent off to the probate referee. And so when you send to a probate referee, if you need one, and I'll go through that, you will send him page 1. There will be page 2, which we'll get to. You will send the inventory, the attachment 1, and you will send attachment 2 together as a full package. That probate referee will then, put values here. He will put a total at the bottom, he or she, and he will write in a number here, and they will total it here, and they will return the form back to you signed, and that is page 2 of the GC 160. They will sign, print their name, date it, and they will tell the court how much they've charged for that inventory and appraisal. You are responsible for paying that bill. And if there's any expenses like toll, travel, mileage, any other expenses, he had to order, let's say, a deed, or he had to order copies of something to be able to give you value. He'll put those expenses here, and he will total it up. The probate referee will then return the entire package to you, filled out, so you are able to see what he valued. If at any time you feel that the value is incorrect, for instance, this real property, you get it back and you see $1,000 value, and you know in your head there's no dang well he must have forgot a 0 or a couple of zeros on there, then you would contact them right away and say you believe that there's an error. Tell them where you believe the error was, and see if they agree with you and wish to correct it. Otherwise, if they do not agree with you and state that is their value and they wish to keep that value, you must turn it in exactly how you received it. So even if you don't agree with the value, say you think the household furnishings are worth $10,000 and they say 500, it's not up to you to cross it out and put 10,000 there or make any changes whatsoever. You will leave it 500. You will turn it in exactly how they valued it. So we're going to go back to the form. You've now received it back by the probate referee. Now realize he hasn't filed or done anything, because besides give value, that's not his job, that's yours. So let's go down to the rest of the form. So the rest of the form, you state here in number 3, attachments 1, we know is cash. Attachment 2 is non-cash. And what are you stating? You're stating they contain a true statement of all, if you're saying it's a final, or a portion, if you're stating it's only a partial. So you're determining what box you're filling out. Now, number 4, if you get down here and there was only cash, there's no non-cash assets, and you didn't require a probate referee, you will just simply mark this box. If on your GC 340 or your DE 140 order, the judge gave you a probate referee, you're going to mark this box and the date the judge signed that order. A lot of times I see this left blank, but I always put a date in here. So you're going to have one of 2 boxes marked. If you forget, or if you turn this in and you don't mark, more than likely you are going to get tentative rulings from your probate referees that say item 4 of the inventory and appraisal is incomplete. So again, you didn't need a probate referee. They automatically know there won't be a value in attachment 2. Or you did need a probate referee and by court order. We're going to go down to number 5, which is the property tax statement. So this statement is going to be one of 2 boxes. Again, A, there was no real property because the property tax statement is only for real property. Or you're going to mark B, which means you've satisfied by filing a change of ownership statement with the county. So in a decedent's estate, once you are appointed, it is your responsibility to file with the county the property is in, that the person has either passed and you are now responsible for the estate, or say for instance it was in joint tenancy, you would have you would file a death of a joint tenant. If it is in a trust, you wouldn't really fill out an inventory and appraisal, but you would complete a death of a trustee. So dependent on your case. On a conservatorship, you really wouldn't change title. There would be no reason to. Okay, down here, you're gonna complete this date. I can't tell you how many times I see these or send them out myself, and the person signs their name and never dates this. You need to date it because you're declaring under penalty of perjury when. You may get it back that says it needs to be dated. You will be putting your name here. Look at the notes on here. You do not sign it before you get it back from the probate referee. So don't sign it and then send it to the probate referee. You wait to sign it after the probate referee has completed these totals. We're going to move down to statement of bond. Again, one of these boxes will need to be marked. The bond was either waived, so you don't need a bond, or the court required you to have a bond, and so you put in an amount here, or all the money is in a blocked account. This is typically for minors. And so you would state, if you have those cash assets up here, sorry, you would state that this amount of money was put into a blocked account. Now, I'm going to give you an example on the bond. Say, for instance, you do have a bond, or a bond was required. And a bond the court ordered was for $20,000. And then you have 2 boxes over here. So if the court ordered a bond of $20,000 and I have these 2 boxes here to fill out, I tell the court my cash is 57,844. Is my bond at $20,000 going to be sufficient, or is my bond going to be insufficient? It's a question. Nobody's volunteering.
So for our bond,
Insufficient.
they valued Garrett's specific accounts and investments. And then they told us what the bond amount would be.
Correct.
The bond agent contacted us and said, you have to pay this much, paid
Correct.
that much. He got the information. And it was also sent to our attorney at the time. But we're
Okay.
planning to represent ourselves pro per. So there's somewhere we would find a bond agent, or does the court assign one to us?
No, you have to find that on your own, but there's no
Okay.
reason why you can't use the same bonding, because the bonding company has nothing to do with the law firm or anything else. So they're independent, so there's no reason why you can't keep, since you've already
Perfect.
applied for it.
Excellent.
You can keep that. But my question here is, say for instance, you have a $20,000 bond.
Right.
And your cash right now showing 57. Would you mark the box that your bond is sufficient or insufficient?
Insufficient.
That is
Insufficient.
that is correct, because a court will always want to know that your bond covers your cash. Your cash walks away, it flies, it goes through the air. I don't know what, I can't tell you how many people say, I don't know what happened to it. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, where did it go? Where, how, why? The importance of a bond is, or the main importance of a bond is, it should cover all cash. And the purpose being is if, for instance, the court deems that cash has disappeared inappropriately, it was not really spent on the conservatee, it was lost unreasonably, whatever the case may be, the court can always, and so can beneficiaries, go to the bonding company, file a claim against you and your bond, and get whatever monies disappeared back into the account of the conservatee or the decedent. So the court always wants to know that your bond covers the amount of cash you have in the account at the time. Now, we're going to go through, after you do the accounting and we get to the petition part, which is another part that I'll come back and teach, how you're going to answer that question again based on the things you did throughout the year or the 2 years. Now, keep in mind that for a decedent's estate, you really only have to do an accounting once. And that is going to be from the day you were ordered to the day you're requesting a distribution. But with a conservatorship, you have to file an accounting after the first year. And then after that first accounting, you get to file every 2 years after the fact. It is up to you to remember to do that accounting every 2 years. After the court, you won't get anything in the mail, you won't get told, you won't get reminded. That's on you. But more than likely the beneficiaries or heirs or somebody else is looking for that accounting, and so you want to make sure that you calendar those dates yourself. Okay, we're going to continue moving on with the
I have
form.
one real quick
Yes,
question.
go ahead.
So with the bond, is there a specific percentage that is standard? Because we didn't pay as much as Garrett has in cash or investments for that bond. We paid a percentage towards that bond. So is there a specific recommended percentage?
No, typically that's up to the courts. The courts kind of make their own determination on how vulnerable they feel that that cash can disappear, or they have many other reasons why they will give the bond amount they give. And so all you can do is go by what the court says. If the court says the bond was 20,000, and even though you had 57, right, you're going to mark your bond was insufficient here in this case, because you're just being forthright to the court. You're trying to say, no, it doesn't look like my bond's enough. But if the court doesn't want to raise your bond amount and they're happy with the bond amount you get, then leave it be. It's cheaper for you. And don't worry about it. Just leave it as it is until the court tells you you need to increase the bond. But again, that's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is you're stating under penalty of perjury yourself what you feel. And if the court wishes to keep it, great. If they wish to raise it, great. It's at their, discretion. It's nothing you can be held responsible for.
Right, but the bond amount said that bond amount matched what Garrett's financial assets were, but the amount we paid, the fee we paid to obtain that bond was not that same amount.
Oh, it never will be, hun.
Okay,
Your
that was
bond,
the percentage I am looking for. The
it
amount I am
depends.
expecting.
It depends on the bonding company. It's up to them. They have their own pricing. And you would never pay for a bond the same amount you would pay for the balance. The bond just has to be able to cover that. It's kind of like car insurance. You pay car insurance, and what you pay for that insurance every year is not the value of your vehicle, or it definitely shouldn't be. So it's very similar to that.
Question.
Yes, son.
Okay, so on this inventory appraisal, before we leave it, my attorney had done this sheet, and of course the checking accounts weren't listed. And this is a corrected one, so it's already been filed. Do we do another correct one, or we just go ahead and bypass it and put it on the next one when we do the finalization?
Okay, so you would need to combine them all, because that was one of the things I said at the very beginning, especially when you're talking about these corrected up here. A lot of law firms do things completely different. I see them all the time where they did a final or a partial, right? And they may have included that checking account that time, and then they issue a corrected one. The corrected one is technically only telling the court what they corrected on the first or second, on the final or that partial. It may not list everything. So in that case, you have to combine two inventory and appraisals when you start your accounting.
So in other words, see, I've been going through this for a year, and this is all new to me on this part. So now we need to do another corrected one with the checking accounts. Correct?
Again, hold on. It depends. You need to look at the first one that was filed. If the first one that was filed had the checking account on there, and when they did the corrected, I'm sorry, what?
It did not.
Okay.
The only correction that was made was the value of the house. So no, the checking accounts have not been listed on the inventory or appraisals.
Then you have to do another corrected. And to me, I would say I would do a final. I would include everything now. I would include the corrected one, the original one, and do a final, and make sure that final is marked to include everything. That's the way I would do it personally.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, again, we're down here to a signature page. If you had an attorney, you would not sign this. The attorney would down here. If you do not have an attorney and you are pro per, then you would sign your name down here with the date. Page 2, again, we briefly went through this. This will just state the estate name. It's same headers as all the other forms. Again, if you have a probate referee, they will complete this and sign. If you don't have a probate referee, then this will be left blank, but you would still include it in your filing. Now, I have gone through all of the inventory and appraisal. Soon as you have it together, it's signed, you will file it with the court. That will be the end of the inventory and appraisal. And this is how you'll start your accounting. For the accounting portion, I'm going to take a break and let Rex come in and teach you the accounting part. And then I will come back after he's gone through the accounting and I will teach you how to do the petition, which is turn in the accounting and say what you want done with that. So I'll let him come in and I'll be back in a little bit.
Thank you, Tamara. Okay. Are we having fun yet? Oh, yeah, I hope so. I wanted to clarify something I said earlier that has to do with the accounting 1 year, and that time frame applies to guardianships and conservatorships. It does not apply to probate. Probate, you can frequently get by with just doing a final accounting and not do interim accountings. Okay, so let me move forward to my section on filling out the forms. Okay, so as Tamara mentioned, we start out with one point in time when you start, then over a period of time, let's say a year, then you have all these transactions. And then at the end of the year, you have a snapshot of what the assets are on hand at the end of the year. And we're going to be doing the interim part at this point for all the transactions. And for that, we're going to be this form GC 400 sum. GC means guardianship or conservatorships. It can also be used for trusts. And the sum means summary. And this is one of the most important form in court accounting, bar none. If Tamara mentioned, I refer to page numbers from the lower left of every page, the large numbers that go 4 zeros and 21. So that is the page that I am on right now. You might consider bookmarking it so that you can come back to it. Because we're going to be going back and forth to this form quite a bit.
So Rex, because we're only required to do our accounting every 2 years now, would I include everything from that 2-year span, or does it just go back 12 months?
Okay, have you done your first years of accounting?
Yeah, Garrett's in his 30s.
Okay, so each time the alternate years, the odd years, you do an accounting from the time you last did the accounting. And what you need to do is the beginning assets on hand on the subsequent accounting has to match identically with the assets on hand at the end of the prior accounting.
Yeah, I have forms in my computer where it's just an ongoing thing.
Okay, but
So I can just look at the last accounting and enter that information into the next accounting and then begin from there.
okay. That's fine. That sounds like what you need to do. So this GC 400 sum, you can use it for guardianship conservators. If you're doing a trust, you would just write that it's a trust. and which account you're doing, second account, third, fourth, and whether it's a final. In a probate, you check final if it's the one before distributions, and you put the beginning date, date of appointment, date letters, date of death, starting, and then the end of the year or 2 years that you're doing to get the format changed, identified to the reader. Couple other formatting on the government forms. Judicial councils like the board of directors underneath the California Supreme Court, and they make the decisions on what forms the court uses. And you'll see here, you've got on the lower left, it's talking about adopted for mandatory use. Mandatory use means that you have to use this form on top of every accounting that you do. And it says for probate, guardianships, and conservatorships, when you submit an accounting for a trust to the court for approval, you also need to use this form. Another formatting note, in the lower right of the form, it says Probate Code Section 1060. And in California Rules of Court 7.575. If you're ever going through an accounting and you have a question, what exactly does this mean? Where did this come from? The background. This is what I call a breadcrumb trail where you can look up the code section that you're trying to comply with. Tamara doesn't like me pointing that out because she says, oh, it's too complicated. No, the Internal Revenue Code is too complicated because we deal with that one. California Probate Code is readable. So the format that we have here, we have the beginning assets, cash and non-cash. The term comes up all the time with accounting. Let me get my book here. There we go. There, okay, now I'm with you. So the carry value is a definition, it's a term. If you know anything about tax, we have a term we use all the time called basis, which is what you paid for something like a rental property, and then you add to it any remodeling and things. With court accounting, the term carry value will be the market value when you started your accounting. So you will take both of these items, the cash assets and the non-cash, and you will have gotten that value, market value on the beginning date from the probate referee. And then interim, if you buy assets, you're going to use the cost, and that will be the carry value. So carry value is kind of equivalent to the term burden. You're responsible to the court for anything that is done with that money. And I use it kind of burden or as responsibility. So you're responsible for all that money. And if it disappears, you got to pay it, which doesn't happen that often, but that's how it works. So then we go to items that came in. Frequently, people use a term like income. And it's more specific. In this case, courts use words that nobody else uses, charges, okay? It is receipts, assets that came in. And then we get into the term credits. And if you know anything about double entry accounting, you can forget debits and credits because it doesn't apply here. The credits are money going outbound that you can justify where the funds went. And as part of it, be included in your report. And then at the end of the accounting period, we're going to total up what we have in assets, cash assets, and non-cash And we're also there talking about carry value. And as you're going through each, these says Schedule A, there might be 2, 3, 4 Schedule A's if you think of like a computer link, a web link. And there's all of the Schedule B's total up to this number. Same thing with the credits, outgoing funds. And if you don't use these other forms, fine, these other lines, I should say, like line 5 or line 6, fine. If you do need them, I would suggest using numbers as the identifier rather than the letters, because when I first started working on these, I go, oh, my next one's E is an echo. And then, oops, I saw it later, it was down here. So I just simplify it by using numbers, Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3. The form indicates the court wants to know if there's nothing. So you don't leave lines blank because that's ambiguous. Did I forget it or is there nothing? When you use the zeros on the empty lines, you're making an affirmative statement that there are none. Okay. So what we're going to do is go through all of these subschedules and determine how to break everything out in groupings that the court will accept. And if you do your accounting on Excel or some other software, this report, this GC 400 sum format, if you have a nice one done up in Excel, I would take the time and just do one on the government form also as your cap sheet on top of your other accounting. Then we'll go on to page 21. This is cash on hand at the beginning of the account period. And it's basically the same thing if your first account from your inventory and appraisal, just a copy job. And if it's a subsequent accounting, it's the last pages of the last accounting you did. And for non-cash, you're going to have your inventory and appraisal numbers from the probate referee. And I like to label them by number, what the asset number is. And then I stick with those asset numbers throughout the accounting, no matter how many years the accounting is going for. And the reason for that is these account numbers help the probate referees to determine and cross-reference year after year. And if I sell an asset, let's say I sold asset number 5, which happened to be a house, I never use that number 5 again if I'm adding new assets. I just leave it out of the numeric sequence. Okay. So on the columns here, when you started out with your inventory and appraisal, all you had was the carry value, which the probate referee gave you. But now they're asking for also the estimated market value. Well, on your first accounting, you leave this blank because they're the same. It was market value. In subsequent accountings, let's say you have a stock portfolio, you should list an estimated market value. Now, for real property, you're also supposed to give an estimated market value of the real property. And quite simply, we'll look at on Zillow or Redfin or Realtor.com and just use a market value there. The market value is important for fiduciaries. A fiduciary is anybody who's a guardian, conservatorship, or trustee. General term is fiduciary because you're handling someone else's money. Like say on a stock portfolio, you want to show the market value of the portfolio just in case the value went down through no fault of your own, and you might get objections from a beneficiary. And once your accounting is approved, even though the value of the accounts went down, which stock market went down, fine, then you're relieved from potential claims on that loss in value. So we'll go on to the next form here, and this is a summary sheet. So as I pointed out, we're going to have a lot of different schedules that'll comprise the A series of forms. These are income forms, inbound funds, and we break them out by categories. And there might be 7 pages of the pensions, there may be 4 pages of the dividends. And this is a place where you can do the accumulations for income coming in, and this are categories for money going out and total. And then you can bring those summaries back to your GC 400 as the total for Schedule A, the total for Schedule C. So it's, from me having an accounting background, I like having this middle step because I can go from the detailed schedules into the summary before I get to the GC 400 sum. And the form itself says don't turn in with the accounting. So that's what they're requesting. Okay, we're going to go into various types of receipts and disbursements. We're in the Form A series, which is this case, dividends. And on the dividends, what you want to do is list them by vendor. If you have 2 or 3 vendors, just list them. And you have to list every one. You cannot do a combination of 4 months on one statement and just list one number. And if you have a large portfolio to account for, stock or mutual fund portfolio, sometimes what you'll have is a dividend reinvestment program, which means that every dividend you've told the broker to buy more securities. Okay, dividend reinvestment program, we abbreviate as DRIP account. The problem with having dividend reinvestments is it creates a whole bunch more work for you. So every time there's a dividend, you have to track the dividend. Every time they reinvest in more securities, you have to show that as a purchase. So if you're accounting for a large portfolio, the first thing you want to do is have the broker not reinvest in any dividends, take all the dividends and put them in cash. And then when the balance gets high enough, then you reinvest. So it cuts out a lot of accounting transactions. And
I understand that you're saying that would cut out accounting transactions, but the attorney we previously used advised us just the opposite. So I'm kind of confused. He
Okay.
said because Garrett has his own investment account through the same agency that we do, it is better to allow the financial manager at that agency to reinvest his dividends on his behalf. They give us a summary. I have just been writing out from what that summary says, but those summaries only come quarterly. So now I'm really confused about how's the best way to handle his investment.
so the term reinvesting dividends can be defined several different ways. You can define it as every time it happens, you reinvest. And that's what I'm suggesting you do not do, because it creates more transactions. Now, if you follow my advice and you have all the dividends put into a cash account or money market, then all at once, there may have been 50 transactions. And then all at once you buy new securities and you're also reinvesting your dividends. But you have 50 less transactions to report.
I understand that part. Thank you. Thank you. That cleared up what I was trying to figure out in my head. Thank you.
Yeah, try to make it simple. Now, there's 48 different forms. We're not going to cover all of them in the court accounting forms, the GC series. So there's a lot. If you have a certain type of transaction and you don't see it, well, you can go on the internet and look at the other GC forms and find one that fits the kind of transaction that you have. Now, we're going to talk later a little bit about Excel and spreadsheets. And what we're going over are the court forms. And you're going to be following the same format generally when you're doing spreadsheets. But I wanted to point out that the Riverside courts, riverside.courts.ca.gov, has a self-help section, and they've got one file that has 38 of these court forms in one file. And the thing I'm pointing out is they're fillable. You can fill them all out before you download them, and then you can use and just fill in the numbers, so you don't have to try to use a PDF and type over. So I found that to be interesting, and it's all in one place instead of having your court forms pulled down from different locations. So on each of the forms here, the way this form is designed is you go to a subtotal on the bottom of the page. And we're on page A, or section A, 1 of 6 pages. Okay. But what you don't do, you do not accumulate your numbers to the next page. You start over. So on the next one, you're on page 2 of 6, but this is a subtotal of this page. If you start accumulating each page, numbers are gonna be way off. So receipts for interest. The forms say amounts, and it really should say income. And I list the interest from each bank. Tamara's mentioning the last 4 or 5 digits of the account number is helpful to mask what the real account number is. And just show each of the vendors separate and pull the numbers off their monthly or quarterly statements. Okay, page 25, we have pensions. If you have a certain type of pension that they're receiving on a regular basis, this particular form is for regular pensions, not Social Security. Why that makes a difference, I don't know. But that's what the form says. Then we get into rents. Now on rents, if you have 2 or 3 rental properties, I would separate the rental income by property. And I would also, this says, 121 View Place. I would list what it is: single family residence, a condo, 100-unit apartment building, and describe the rent that you get in. If there's a transaction where a tenant does repairs, you should not net your numbers. In other words, if the rent was $2,500 and the tenant agreed to repair the back deck for $500, and then they only paid $2,000, you would not show the net number of $2,000 for rental income. You would show the $2,500 of rental income, and then on the $500 that was bartered for the tenant, you would show that as a disbursement. Okay, and for the rentals, It's only for rental properties. If you have a business, it's not included in this form. A business like an Airbnb, bed and breakfast, hotels, motels, or regular businesses don't show here. Just for regular rentals. Okay, here's for the Social Security. We had a probate referee take our class a while back. Probate referees are the experts for the judge. And she pointed out immediately that this is wrong. This shows Social Security for a quarter and then a total. And she said, you can't do that. Every one of the transactions has to be shown separately or it won't be acceptable. Something else that you might consider is the courts will only accept forms in portrait mode. If you try to go landscape mode, like for Excel spreadsheets and things, the courts will kick them out. They want a 12-point font. They're quite detailed.
So Garrett's income is actually a stipend that comes from the fiduciary agent who also funds his larger trustee account separate from what we manage. We have been accounting for that stipend he gets each month and the expenditure of that stipend.
Okay, so that's exactly where we are. Okay, so
Perfect. Oh, very good. I'm just a step ahead. I apologize.
so not a problem. This is receipts from other sources. So you would describe it and realize I am listening to that for the first time. And I'm a little confused by the word stipend and where's it coming from? You told me before he had a trust. Is that the amount that's supposed to be distributed from the trust every month?
So the amount that's distributed to us as his conservators is to pay for personal expenses for Garrett. We don't use that to pay for his daily
Okay,
care.
it's
We
not,
don't
we're
use
not,
that-
we're talking, I'm only focusing on the income at the moment.
Okay.
Who is it coming from?
It comes from Genworth Trust. Genworth, they're a
Okay, so
financial agency that
is-
manages.
Okay, so the answer to the question is he gets a monthly distribution from a trust that is his trust.
Correct.
Okay, so all you need to do is say Garrett's monthly trust distribution.
Distribution. Okay, that's the difference. Great. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
yeah, and then show the amount. You don't want to get too explanatory. You want to explain where the money came from. You want to explain where the money went and how that benefits the ward. Use the ward. But you don't want to confuse them by a lot of other stories because it'll derail the report. So we are on a miscellaneous. So if you couldn't figure out where else to put it, this would be the page. And as I pointed out in the page A1 of 6, now we're on page A6 of 6. So at this point, you want to total out all of your income page A, whatever, into one number. If you go back to page 22, you can summarize it by category like I like to do. You don't have to. You can go directly to the page 21, which is the GC 400. And what you have now is you have the total that combines on Schedule A for all the pages to be 43,000. So you're walking down the page of your GC 400 sum. Okay, now where did I leave off? Other, okay. Gains, okay, there we are. So gains on sale. In this case, the example is you sold the house. It could have been stocks. And the carry value, you know where you got that. We talked about it. And then we have a sale price and a gain of 19,000, it says. Well, I do a lot of income tax, and I guarantee you that is not the gain. The gross value at the carry value minus the gross sales price. You got a whole lot of closing costs that need to be deducted before you call it a gain in tax. But here we ignore the closing costs. They're just showing the income at this time. And I'll show you later where the closing costs end up. And the same kind of transaction happens with each security sale or mutual fund sale. Okay. Let me just go back here. Okay, so this is gains on sale, and then it shows here disbursements. So now we're going into the disbursements part. Money going out, also called the credits. Well, before we get into the credits, just realize that you have to total up each line on the GC 400 sum for all the income, and then move on to the disbursements. In this case, we have long-term care facility costs. And we have one client that pays $150,000 a year in living costs, special care, but it's all listed here, and you don't break it out by meals and things like that. You just list what the care facility charges every month. And I want to point out another term, and that is, Tamara touched on it a bit, and that's a change in form of assets. So let's say you took money out of the investment account, put it over into a checking account. That's considered a change in form of assets, and you need to show that on a Schedule F, and it's the form GC 400 capital F. So a lot of people forget that when they're transferring money back and forth, but that's what it is. You have to report it as such. It's not income, it's not a disbursement, but it's no longer in the investment account. Now it's in a, say, a cash account or a checking account. So we'll move on to page 31. General and administrative expense. This, again, is kind of a catch-all. You can call it miscellaneous. Everything else that didn't fit here and the other pages will go here. In this case, we've got conservator fee, and you'll see that it says reimbursement. You can reimburse the attorney or the conservator or the trustee for their out-of-pocket costs. But with a guardianship and conservatorship, you cannot pay any compensation to the attorney, cannot pay any compensation to the conservator until the court approves it. Otherwise, the court will have strong words for you. So in this case, we have all reimbursements, including the probate referee fee.
Is there a schedule somewhere online that I could find that represents what attorneys typically charge, not for out-of-pocket expenses, but for the attorney's fees, so that I can see if we choose to go to another attorney, if what I'm paying is reasonable, or do I just need to call everybody and ask?
I think that there's no real answer to the question. There's, like for auto repair, there's a book that says, oh yeah, changing out an alternator is going to take 1.2 hours. There's nothing like that for legal services. So the hourly rate doesn't tell, because, in a law firm, there might be, one attorney charging a certain X amount of dollars, and then administrative staff that charges different, and how the time is allocated. I don't see that you would be able to get anything that you could actually compare. I think that if your attorney had no administrative staff at all, well, that tells me that there's nobody at a lower billing rate unless they put that in as their lower billing rate. But I don't have an answer for you on how to get the best deal for legal services, other than
That's fine. That's fine. That answered my question.
negotiating would be one way. Doing more of the work yourself could be another. For a guardianship, conservatorship, and trust, you're not required to have an attorney. It's not law that says you have to have an attorney. And that's a lot of the reason why we teach this class.
Right.
Is,
But that's what we found out, and that's why we're taking this course.
yeah, when
that
we
we can
started the
represent ourselves
class, it
appropriately.
was for people who were self-represented, although it worked for everybody, but it was the self-represented people who needed some guidance, and they didn't really have anybody to guide them. Speaking of another, I mentioned the Riverside courts, and there's some good educational videos on there about being a conservator of the person and being a conservator of the estate. They've got some very well designed, one's an hour long, one's a half hour. Anyway, I point those out. It helps guardians and conservators. It doesn't do much for trustees.
Question.
Okay, so we're into general question.
Okay, so this sheet here, so if I haven't paid out the attorney fees, which were about 10 grand, that doesn't go on here because it has not been paid out of the estate, correct?
Correct.
Also, I noticed at the top, conservatorship, guardianship. I'm an administrator. Which one would I check? Because I'm an administrator, neither one of those.
If you're an administrator on a probate, you can, the name, in this case, it's Janine Lowry, you would put the estate of mom.
Okay.
And you don't need to tell anybody that in a probate court, when you see the term estate of mom, they know.
Okay.
You don't need to check a box.
Okay. Okay. All right. Question answered. Thank you.
Sure. And on the attorney's fees in a probate, it's an ironclad rule. The attorneys get zero until the final distribution, and the administrator, executor, also gets zero. The administrator can get the same fee as the attorney's charge, and it will be approved by the court. One of the things they say about the attorney's fees on a probate is that this is the fee for the attorney, and that's not true. What they quote to you is the maximum fee that the statute allows. So you can negotiate different fees, but it's not a requirement. And most frequently, my executors and administrators, if they're a major beneficiary, they do not take a fee for their work, because when you take an executor administrative fee, you have to pay income tax on it. And if you wait and get a distribution, you don't have to pay income tax.
Okay.
Some other forms that you can just make note of, and one of them is IRS Form 56. So you're a fiduciary and you're also required to do any income tax returns. If your trust or probate estate has over 600 of income, you've got a fiduciary income tax return due IRS Form 1041. And the IRS Form 56 tells the IRS that you're in charge, you're the trustee, you're the executor administrator, that they need to contact and communicate with you, not with the anyone else. Let's see. So let me also tell you how to sign documents. Comes up in trusts and estates, even in guardianship and conservator. Let's say it's the Jean Lowry estate. So when you're signing legal documents, you would sign Jean Lowry estate by Iris Lucky administrator. So you put the entity first and then your name below it, and that includes tax returns, other types of contracts. And you do that to identify the actual responsibility is the estate. Another thing that you should be aware of, and I had come up through accounting school and we were always using adding machines, and now it's even hard to buy them. But always check your numbers, because if these don't balance, you are going to take a lot of time to make them balance. And what I suggest that you check every number, even if you're doing it on a computer, look at the numbers that you keyed in and cross-reference everything, because it's just too easy to make a typo and it could take you hours to undo it. Okay, now we've got disbursements, miscellaneous living costs, personal items. And you see we're on the group schedule C of pages 3 of 8. And we're listing check number and date of the disbursement. Then we go to medical expenses. Just list the amounts paid, and that's the amount of the copay. If there's more than insurance is paying, you do not list that. You just list what was the out of pocket. I wanted to point out some errors, common errors and problems that people do for court accounting that the probate examiners mark up and tell you need to fix them. One is the GC 400 may not balance. The other is if you have that look like unusual expenses. Let's say you had bought 20 sets of bed sheets. Well, that may be excessive. They think maybe it's personal use, but then you would put in there, the ward is incontinent, and then it justifies how it benefits the ward. You only put in assets that in the accounting that you have responsibility for. A big problem is like in business, we have an income statement or profit and loss. That's so common. We don't have anything like that in court accounting. Missing data. If you have assets out of state, you don't include those. So there's quite a few different things that could be considered errors. I wanted to point out something else too, and that is for reference book. This book fiduciary accounting handbook is put out by CCA, Continuing Education of the Bar in Oakland, CEB. And Margaret Hand, attorney, and Arinda, with some other people, have written this book. And it's a great book for a reference lookup. Don't think that you're going to learn how to do accounting with this book. It is a reference book, and if I'm looking up some unusual transaction, I'll use the index and find it here. The book is about, oh, I don't know, $300 per copy. It's but it's an expensive administration.
So another question for you. So I had utility bills to pay at the house, construction. Where would that be listed?
Okay, you have house construction.
Yeah, so house construction, because I had to get the house ready for selling. So we had a lot of contractors there fixing the house. And also the regular utility bills had to be paid at the home.
Okay, utility bills are just administrative costs.
Okay. So that's on that previous page that you had.
Right.
Okay.
So on page 34, property sale expenses, this
Okay.
is where we're showing the escrow costs. And I think that if you did some improvements just before sale, that would be appropriate here, describing what it is.
Okay. How about hauling? Would that also be on this section?
Hauling, like trucks.
Yeah, I had stuff hauled out of the home.
The purpose of the transaction was to sell the house.
Correct.
So what we're doing is property improvement for sale. So I would list that here also.
Okay.
So our property was improved, but not for sale. We had to make everything ADA accessible because Garrett uses a wheelchair. Most of that was covered in the previous accounting, but anything that was not, because it's not for sale, would I put it in the above form of just disbursements?
Okay, go to page 33.
Yeah, that's the one I was looking at.
And it sounds to me like it's a medical expense.
Perfect.
Not to
Thank you.
improve the property, it's to do an accommodation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Sure. Okay, so on 34, we have it's kind of funny on an escrow. The one number that you never include in a court accounting is the amount of cash that came out of the sale. You show the gross, you show all the expenses, but not the net cash, because that ends up being derived after showing the expenses separate. Disbursements, property sale, we just talked about that a bit. This is a repeat, but it's a different line item. In this example, property was sold and there was a consignment fee. So that's deducted here as for sale.
Okay, so question. So on here, on this one, we had a piano and I sent it to consignment. And they sold it for a certain amount. And that's what I would put in here.
No. You would put the consignment fee here. Well, let me show you where you would put the sale of the piano. When I can find it. Here. Page 29. We have gain on sales. There's another one similar on losses, but you end up taking your carry value compared to what you sold it for, and that's the gain or loss. Does that help, or is that complete?
Okay. Then back to the other page, way back, where you had the closing costs, we would also put in there she had a reverse mortgage. I would put the reverse mortgage in that section also, paying off the reverse mortgage, any liens that were on the home also.
Let me think for a second there.
Right here.
Yes,
Okay. And any other liens that were on the home would be put on here.
yeah, because what normally happens, this is peeled out from an final closing statement, escrow report. And so line items were taken off that, but in a sale, there are other costs that escrow didn't have anything to do with.
Correct.
And you'll see here, secured loan payoff. That's the same thing you're talking about, the reverse mortgage. It was a secured loan.
Correct.
So this is an example of one.
Okay.
I forgot where I was, but I'll find myself. Okay.
Right there.
Disbursements. Oh yeah, thank you. So on page 36, we're looking at disbursements for rental property. You just list them chronologically by property, whatever the amounts are. And you just show the loan payment. You do not break out principal and interest. That's not required. Okay.
Now, another question. Throughout the year, I've gotten refund checks. Like I got a refund check for AAA, different things. Where would you put that? Like taxes, I got a refund.
Okay, on page 28 is receipts, other receipts, miscellaneous.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're in the disbursement section, miscellaneous that didn't fit in other pages. Court approved allowance to the ward, perhaps. How just repairs, not part of a sale of a house. Bank and financial expenses, recreation, leisure, postage, pet expenses would go in this miscellaneous section. And here we're on the section of forms called C, and we're on 8 of 8. So at this point, we will be adding up all of the C items. And we're on 37 at the moment, and we're going to go back to the GC 400 on page 21, and we'll list, as it shows here, all the total for all the schedules C. Now let me see if I can find my plate. Oh, I was lucky. Okay, now we have another one showing a loss on sale. We're on the disbursement side, so a loss would go there. We have the junker car here, the old Oldsmobile. We had a carry value of 3,100, sale price of 3,000. So you have a paper loss of 125. Otherwise, you won't balance. You do the same thing on stock sales. Unfortunately, you got to break out the gains on the gain section and the losses on a separate schedule.
So if we have a vehicle, carry value was 0 because the car was totaled, do we still list it? So it is on our inventory as 0. And it was a total vehicle, it was sent to the junkyard.
Okay. Because it was on your inventory and appraisal, I would list it here as carry value 0, sales price 0, loss 0.
Okay.
And then the cost to tow it to the junkyard may be a miscellaneous expense.
Yeah, it didn't cost us anything. They came and picked it up.
Okay. Okay, so we've gone through income pages. Now we've gone through expense pages. And now we fill out all the parts of the GC 400 sum, and we're at the end of the accounting period. So just like at the beginning, you reconcile the bank accounts as of March 7th and list the balances, and everything you still have left over on the carry value for the non-cash assets at the end of the accounting period are shown here. And we've got carry value in one column, estimated market value on the other. And don't worry about getting yelled at by the judge for having market value that is not right. You do the best you can, and it really, that market value will never cause you to imbalance anything. So let me go back. Okay, so now we're on the page 21 again. And so we had the beginning inventory appraisal, all of the income items by schedule. We have a total charges. Then we have all the disbursements. And then we list the assets at the end of the account period. And lo and behold, it balances. Line 7 equals line 14. So now that is acceptable. I'll point out something else that's kind of helpful. When people do their first accounting, they're worried that maybe it's not the right format. How did I screw it up? You know, the court's going to take it apart. You can go to the court, and the probate examiners have told us in Contra Costa that they're happy to look at someone's formatting to see if the format would be acceptable. And they make a big emphasis that we're not approving your accounting numbers, but it's kind of like being graded by a teacher in college. They look at the format and oh no, your format's way off. And they'll help you with the format. Okay, another item is if you want a dazzling completion certificate, send us an email and we'll send you one of these, and they're really valuable. I mean, this in about $8 will get you a mocha at Starbucks, but it is something. Now I want to switch gears for a moment when I can find my form. Okay, this is another handout. It's handout number 2, and this is an Excel spreadsheet of a court accounting. So this summary sheet, which would need to be copied over onto the GC 400 sum, has the basic information. You know, the value of the assets at the beginning of the account period, the amounts that came in, the disbursements, and then it balances. And this particular account has, well, the list of assets at the beginning. And then it shows receipts in 2 different ways. Income showing as chronological income. And then after the chronological income, it has receipts by category. And this, I think, is, to me, looks like a work of art. And so you have the same thing with the expenses. Expenses, chronological, and then expenses by categories. And the changes of change in form of assets at Schedule F, property sales. And then at the end, you'll have the same thing about inventory and appraisal at the end of the account period. So this is an example for you of another way to do all of the accounting using some of the detail from our forms that we've been talking about, judicial counsel. But this kind of spreadsheet is very common in the courts. And you just put a GC 400 sum on top of it. So I wanted to make sure, because we have the government forms and you use those obviously, but they're not as common. I'd say the most common accounting reports that I see are the spreadsheets. So that's the material that I wanted to cover with you. Now I'm going to bring Tamara Brown back, and she's going to explain the report about when you turn your accounting into the court, you just don't give them the accounting. You have another report to go with it.
Before you go,
Yes.
unclaimed California properties, where would that go? Under miscellaneous?
Unclaimed, it would go in your inventory and appraisal.
Okay. Oh, but see, we don't have it yet. So that would go in my.
You have rights to it. Those rights are what you're reporting.
So I need to put that in the inventory appraisal. Okay.
Yes, and I've dealt with them. We've got a big case going. We got about $100,000 coming from them, and I have never seen a slower agency in my life.
You're 6 months behind.
Well, yeah, we've been going a year and a half. So anyway, it's quite a challenge. And we have some securities. We had to open a securities account because they didn't want to sell them and they want to transfer them in as securities. But yeah, they're a good exercise in learning patience. That's what I call it.
Okay.
So other questions before I depart?
No.
Okay, great. So here's
Are
Tamara.
you leaving for that lunch?
Yes. Thank you.
Have fun. How long is it?
It's probably until 2.
And then I'll wait and come back. I'll wait and probably leave when you come back. Yeah, okay. Sorry, guys, I'm saying bye to Rex. He's taking off for a lunch meeting and leaving me here alone. No, I'm kidding. Okay. And now you've been through the exciting, how do you prepare an accounting? And I'm going to be going through the part that once you have finished that accounting, what are you going to do with it? Or how do you get it in front of the court to review it? And I don't know what he did, but my papers has got all jumbled. Anyway, and what is the importance and what you're going to state to the court? And remember when, excuse me, I was talking earlier about you put it in your accounting and say what you did. This is the report I'm talking about on kind of saying what you did. So let's say we're going to start. What you would do is you're going to look on the internet for what they call pleading paper, PLEADING paper. And all that means is that you have numbers alongside here that these numbers are just that's what they call pleading paper. It will come out blank form. Again, all this data you yourself would add in for the petition. So we would start by putting your name. Again, remember this kind of copies the same format as the inventory and appraisal. So it would just state your name, your address, your phone number, your email, instead of writing attorney for, I would leave that blank and just put your name, conservator. The Superior Court of California, remember that was the data you put on the inventory and appraisal? In this case, we have a conservatorship of the person, which means the physical person, and the estate, which means their finances. And we have the conservatee. Remember earlier on when I was teaching the inventory and appraisal, I was saying that I usually put in parentheses and then AKA. This is another way they have done it. I would have put it on the inventory and appraisal, but the example didn't show that. Here they put also known as. I don't use those words. I just literally put AKA and then the name, but you can do either way. Over here, you have your case number. And this is the title of the petition you are submitting. So it could be your first account. It could be your second account. It could be your third account. It depends how long you've been doing this. For decedent's estates or somebody that's deceased, it will usually always be your first account, because after your first account, basically you'll be petitioning for a final distribution. So there wouldn't be a second account. Usually your first, second, thirds are conservatorship accounts or minor accounts. So it's in our title, we have first, account current, and report of the conservator. So if you're not a conservator and have a decedent's estate, you would just say first account current and report of administrator. Or it could read first account current and report of executor. Just depends your title on. And petition for its settlement. In the case, Rex gave an example where there was a sale of a depreciating property. And this is the only time and way you can ask for an allowance or to be paid as the conservator. With a probate estate, you would not ask for turning in your petition. You wouldn't ask for compensation. On a probate, you don't get compensated until the final distribution petition. But then again, for a probate, I really wouldn't turn this in. It would just be part of the final. And then your attorney fees. This is the only time you can ask if you are using an attorney to have the attorney be paid. Typically on date of hearing, I will leave this blank because you do not know when the date of hearing will take place until you file it. And typically the court will write this in. So your date, time, department, judicial officer, I leave that all blank and I wait for the court to fill it in. I usually don't put judicial officer, and the only reason for that is sometimes they change, like who you think was your judge one day. If let's say they're out and there's a commissioner sitting in or a pro tem sitting in, or somehow for some reason they moved some of your cases to a different department that day, I just don't like putting in the name there, so I will leave this off. It's not important whether it's really there or not. Okay, so I am the petitioner. I am David. And I put here and after, I'm just gonna refer to myself as the conservator. That's what the brackets are. It's just saying from now on, if I just say conservator, I'm referring to myself, David Lowry. Okay, so as a conservatee of the estate of Jeannie, and who is the conservatee, I present for settlement and allowance the first report. And I, as the petitioner, respectfully state, and basically you're going to tell the judge what you've done. So the first thing, and okay, so when you're completing this, one of the most important things to consider and keep in mind is your papers need to stand on their own. And those are terms used in the legal field quite a bit. And what that basically means is I should be able to read your papers and know everything I need to know to, let's say, form an opinion or decide if I want to approve or whatever. I should be able to read it right here. I shouldn't have to go look through your file and find out any information. So again, when I say your papers should stand on their own, all that really means, and really anytime you write any papers, whether it's legal papers or anything else, I practice this a lot, is I make sure anytime I write anything, each time I write it, it must stand on its own, so that if somebody picks it up, they know start to finish what the heck I'm talking about. Okay, so I start out with appointment. When was I appointed? So in this case, you'll see I am the petitioner, and I was appointed on this day. This is the day the orders, this date, real important, again, one that went on the inventory and appraisal date the orders were signed. You'll see here, I also state letters were issued a different date. Again, this is likely because there was a bond and it maybe took a few days to get the bond. At all times, I've been acting as the conservator. Number 2, inventory and appraisal. Remember, we put this in. An inventory and appraisal was filed with the court on this day, showing a value, and that would be the total value of this amount. Okay, so now the judge is looking at it and he goes, okay, I see the day you were appointed. Well, so would the probate referee read this. I see the day you were appointed. I could quickly go over the inventory and appraisal and go, okay, what day? So see how I state here, March 8th. Then if I go, okay, she has March 8th. Okay, those two match. I instantly know those two match. I go to your accounting here and I say, when was this started? March 8th. Guess what? You're on track. I mean, those are the first things that are going to happen. It takes seconds to look at all three of those. But even if I was, say, the judge, I wish. But even if I was the judge, I quickly did that and said, okay, everything is in line. Nothing I got to say. They're doing good, right? So that's why you're stating that. And goodness gracious, I lost here we go. That's why we're putting that all in here. He can, the judge can also see, okay, your total is 1-3. My example didn't have that total, but what is he going to do? He's going to look right here on this line. Okay, total's 1-3. We're great. We're got everything rolling. Okay, number 2, the period of the account. Again, it's not up to the judge to figure out what the period should be. You clearly have to state it. So March 8th, through March 7th. That's a full year. Then what are they going to do? They're going to go to your summary page again and say, okay, March 8th through March 7th. Okay, everything's good there. And everything matches. Whoops, page 2. Charges and credits. Remember, charges and credits is again from the GC 400 sum. You will see where it says charges and credits. Authorized investments. This is always important, but during the account period, all the cash must be invested in interest-bearing accounts. I will tell any of you right now, and I'm, just giving you a heads up. If the account that you opened is not an interest-bearing account, I would change it to one, or I would close it and start another one. That would be a pain in the neck, but let me give you examples of what's happened in the past. So whether it's a decedent's estate or a conservatorship, right? The administrator, in this case, it was the administrator. The administrator put the decedent's money in a non-interest bearing account. And maybe the probate took, I will say typically probates take 15 months, depending on the court. Sometimes they can be a little bit longer. So sometimes they can be a whole lot longer, especially if you're gathering property from other states and you have to do ancillary probates and they take forever and a day. So, say you're talking years. So I had an administrator who didn't put the money in an interest-bearing account, and we're talking probably about 2 million in cash that wasn't gaining interest. A beneficiary petitioned the court and asked that the administrator be held liable for the interest they should have received had the administrator put the money in an interest-bearing account. What happened then was the administrator had to pay the beneficiary that money because they did not put the money in an interest-bearing account. So it's important that you really do keep it in an interest-bearing account. That's for conservatorships also. They want to see that the money is kind of doing something, even though many times my conservatorship accounts, they might get a penny a month for interest. And you're thinking, Lord, that's not even worth it. I got 12 cents. That's not even $1 in a year. Like, who cares, right? It's going to take me more work to calculate that 12 cents than it is to actually get any gain from it. You must do it. Okay, statement of all liabilities. You state whether there were any liabilities. In this case, there must have been a lien on the home, probably the initial loan document papers or whatever. There was a lien on the home. But there are no taxes unpaid, sorry. Sale of the automobile. Now, okay, so we're getting into places, and several of the other Zooms Rex has recorded and thrown on YouTube. I actually get to review some accountings once in a while if they allow me to, but I get to review some accountings and they say, okay, I watched your video and then I did the accounting, and I get to see where I failed as a teacher of this in teaching some things. From number 6 needs to be on your petition. But number 7, if you did not sell an automobile during the time of your accounting, don't put this on here. And there are only a few I say don't put this on here. So I did videos. I do them every time we do this teaching. And I said, oh, if you don't need some categories, don't put them on here. And then I got this petition back from somebody to review. And I think she went from number 1 up top here to number 20 down at the bottom because she said, oh, I didn't need any of those. And I'm like, no, hon, yes, you did. So again, when I say don't put them if you don't need them, it would only be something like this. If you didn't sell an automobile, if you didn't even have an automobile in your inventory, don't put anything in here. Skip this. Make number 7 something else that will come a little later, and we'll show you as that goes through. But on this, I state I showed an automobile on the inventory and appraisal. I even state it was item number 2 or attachment 2. That means non-cash. It was item number 7. I sold it for a loss. I also showed it on my accounting, which was the
Hang
Schedule
on a minute,
D.
hon.
Sorry.
I was asking my son to wait a minute. I had unmuted to ask you a question, but I was waiting for your statement because you may answer what I'm going to ask.
Okay, so the conservator requests approval of the sale of that depreciating property. So go ahead, hon. What were you going to ask?
So Garrett had a 2011 wheelchair accessible van, and his dad had an old truck. We could get more for the truck in trade-in, so we traded that in and used that money to purchase him a new wheelchair accessible van, and we transferred the title of the old van, which included Garrett, to only include his dad, because he now uses that for a work vehicle, or if our new vehicle, I think it's a 2019, has to go in the shop, because it's often very difficult to get a rental with a lockdown, which is how we install Garrett's wheelchair when he travels.
Okay. So what was your question, hon?
So do we list, we would just write out that transaction as a transfer of title, because we didn't sell his old vehicle. We transferred it to his dad, and then he bought a new one with his money. We used our old vehicle for the down payment.
Okay, that would be more of the change in form.
Change in form. Thank you. That was my question. Thank you. I just didn't know how
And
to
not
word it.
necessarily a sale. So basically
Right.
you changed from one vehicle to another, and then
Correct.
you would have your deposit wouldn't be included in there because that
Okay.
was kind of the vehicle. And so you would only include the amount you paid from his savings, right? As a deposit for, or a
Perfect.
you know, for a vehicle that, and you can explain that, you know, had ramps, had this, had whatever.
Yeah.
And then what happens is that now new vehicle becomes part of, that's how you get it into the accounting. And so now going forward, where you have your assets at the end of the period, that will now become, the next time you do accounting, it will become your assets at the beginning of your period, right? So your first accounting, assets at the end of your account period. Now you have to do your second year accounting. Those all become your assets at your beginning of your account period. Then you list all that you did during that account period. And then you're going to have totally, you may have, but most of the time you will have totally different assets at the end of that second period. And it all rolls forward. So likely that van, unless, like, say in your second timing you add, I don't know, other special items for him, right? If you add things like that to it, you would just add that to your accounting, and then now that becomes even a higher appreciated vehicle because it's, you know, got a lot of function.
It does, but thank you. That tells me where to go with all these documents. Thank you.
Okay. So again, the second one, we have a sale of furniture. This was on Rex's accounting. If you don't sell any furniture, you would not have this here. In this case, we're talking about as the example, they sold a vacation home that was no longer needed. So this person sold furniture. So in this case, again, you're reporting what did I do and how did I do it? And in this case, the property sold, or let's see, the property was sold for its appraised value, but I had to pay a dealer 20% charge, so that became a fee. And so really all you're doing is explaining what you did, right? And why you felt it was okay. I'm telling the court, well, this conservatee will never use that vacation home. Say she's in a care facility that doesn't require, that doesn't really allow leaving. And maybe I shouldn't use the word allow, but maybe I should say they're unable to easily leave that facility, right? Because maybe it requires ambulance transportation or something else. And maybe you could hire an ambulance to go to a vacation home, but then I would think you would need care providers and everything else. So basically the court gets it. You don't have to describe all that. All you have to say is the conservator knows the conservatee wouldn't ever be able to use that vacation home again. So there was no reason to have it, you still having to pay bills and stuff on it when it couldn't be used. So you sold it. Again, we have sale of real property. You may not have this. Again, it was the vacation home. So basically you're just stating what you did. Now, here's where I was talking earlier about the additional bond. So what I'm doing here, and here again, you'll see I talk about additional bond. So think of it this way. So I have a bond for my cash of the $57,000 you saw on the initial inventory and appraisal, right? My bond, say I only have 20, so my bond was already insufficient at the inventory and appraisal stage. But now think of this, I just sold the vacation home. I don't know how much the accounting was for on that vacation home, but let's just give an example of $1 million. And now not only do I have the 57,000, well, I probably wouldn't have that either because of bills being paid and then income coming in. But say now, because of the vacation home, I have $1,500,000 now in cash, right? That's spendable, that I could write checks on, that I could do whatever. Right here is where I'm going to tell the court, either I sold the house and now I have this much and my bond is insufficient, or because I knew that my bond was insufficient and I now have even $1 million more than I did before, I went ahead and increased the bond on my own. I don't see that often. I really, really don't. In all the cases I work on, I don't see the person being proactive, and nothing's going to happen if you don't. Literally, you can just tell the court and leave it up to their discretion if they want you to increase the bond. So you have your choice. Either way, you can go do it. You can increase the bond yourself, or you can wait till the court and say, hey, I know my bond is not sufficient, and so I want the court to tell me what my bond should be increased to.
So Rex said this, but I want to make sure I get the point correct so I don't make any errors when we do this ourselves. All of our real property is held in trust under my husband and myself, and for both our adult sons who are persons with disabilities. Garrett is the only person who is conserved in that family trust. As long as he does not own the property independently, we don't have to account for everything, do we?
That's correct. You do not. You're only responsible for his stuff he owns right now, not when somebody passes or when an event takes place. And I do hope that with your trust, because of his specific disability, that you did some type of special needs. Otherwise, if you
So
did,
we could not, his trust is called a reversionary trust, and it's
oh,
held by the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, the Navy, and the Air Force.
gotcha. Okay.
So when he passes, his portions go back, but everything that's held by my husband and myself in trust for our boys, when we pass, their cousin is guardian now, and we plan to add her to the conservatorship. So it'll be seamless if we were to die unexpectedly in a car crash or something.
Right. And you never know. I know that sounds
Unfortunately,
terrible to
that
say.
sounds tragic, but it's better to
Very.
plan and be proactive.
Right. And most of the time, and the reason why I say that for others is most of the time, not when it has to do with your specific situation, but other situations for adult children or adults that need to be conserved is they lose all their government benefits if they inherit. But if you create a special needs trust, meaning they don't control the assets, then they do not lose the government benefits and they keep them. So
Right. And we've tried for the last 25 years to get them to convert it to a special needs trust, but the Air Force and the Navy want their money back.
yeah, and right, I can understand. And
I don't,
typically,
but you know.
but typically what I've also seen happen is, because you mentioned the guardianship, typically when the person, say for instance, needs to go get that guardianship in writing, basically confirmed by the court, then the court may state the money they want the guardian to create a special needs trust. Now think you're already gone, so they'll tell the guardian they want them or her or him to create a special needs trust for the conserved person or the one they have guardianship for.
Yeah,
And it's done.
Garrett receives no state benefits. So in our case, what they recommended was to have a guardian of the person and somebody of the estate, and then when we pass, those people would become conservators over those.
Right. I
Okay.
fully understand. That's a true statement. Okay, so the next thing, remember when I was talking about the person I reviewed before completely skipped some of these because she said, no, I don't have to answer. But number 11 is very important to put on all petitions. What is it? It states there is no affiliate relationship during this account period. I'm gonna give you a real quick example so you understand what that means and why. So I have a conservatee. I'm a conservator, and the conservatee, let's say, is now living with me, or even in a care home or what have you, and the house is still in its form in the city, wherever it is, right? So that conservatee has, I'm gonna just use a landscaper, right? Landscaper comes to me and says, hey, Tamara, I'm going to take a month off and I'm just going to travel with my wife. And so no, let's say 2 months. For 2 months, I cannot do the landscaping. I don't have anybody else. I don't know who I would refer. Basically, you're on your own, right? So I go, oh, geez, okay. Thank you, and gives me advance notice. I go out, I contact a bunch of landscape companies and say, I don't know, it's the middle of summer and they're either on vacation or they're so darn busy, they can't help me, right? Again, I said the middle of summer. Then all of a sudden, my son comes home from college and I go, aha, my son knows how to pull out a lawnmower, right? And I don't know, a weed eater. And I go, son, I need you to do me a favor for 2 months every week. I need you to go over to Mary's house and I need you to mow her lawn. And because I know you need money for college, and I know, you know, you have books coming up, and I know you want some extra money for the summer, I'll give you, let's say $75 every time you go. So that means $75 a week, because maybe it goes once a week, right? That's all fine and good in that situation, except if I normally pay the gardener $50 every time he comes, but because I know my son needs college money or for books or for whatever reason, I'm giving him 75. That's where you're wrong. It cannot happen. This, you state, I would have in my case said, yes, I have hired my son. He is related to the conservator because he's my son. And he was off of school for college and was able to do it, and I couldn't find anybody else. I'm also going to have to state in this statement that I paid him however amount I paid him. So if the courts feel that for landscaping for 2 months, I issued my son a check for, let's say, $5,000, that court will instantly know something's wrong here. 2 months of landscaping isn't $5,000, and they will think that I'm using the conservator's money for my benefit or to enrich my family in a way anyway, and it's not allowed. So again, you can hire family to help you, but that family cannot be paid anything more than another reasonable company would. And if you're talking, say for instance, like say you were gonna hire me, who's a professional, I've licensed, I've been doing this a long time, blah, 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 okay, to do it, your accounting. And instead you said, hey, my daughter's home, she knows Excel, I'm gonna hire her. What you would pay me as a professional with the experience is not the same that you can pay your daughter who hasn't really no idea what she's doing. I mean, she can figure it out. It's Excel. She's just going to plug it down and do it. You cannot pay her the same fee you would pay somebody who has experience doing it, because your daughter's just not at that level. So be reasonable when I say you can hire family members, but be reasonable in the amount you pay them. That's really the only thing. Okay, now we're getting down to conservators' compensation. In this case, if you are requesting compensation as a conservator from your conservatee, you will need to keep a, let's say, journal or some type of handwritten calendar through the year that would show, say, for instance, on this date, I took them to a dental appointment. It was an hour. Now, that doesn't include, I took him to a dental appointment, then we went out to lunch and I enjoyed lunch with them. And then I needed to go to Walmart and I went shopping too, and they just came with me because they had nothing else to do. You don't get to count all that time as doing something for the conservator. You only get to count the time at the dentist. Now, that doesn't mean that, okay, if I'm not being paid to watch you, I'm not going to. In the very second after the dentist appointment, you shoot them home and then go, now I got to go all the way back and do my rounds. No, that's not fair either. And it just means that you're not technically paid for it. So
We don't charge for any of our time, but could we charge for the gas that we have to put in Garrett's vehicle? It is used only to take him on outings, to and from his day program
You
or
don't
to a
need to,
medical appointment?
sweetheart, you don't need to explain that. Any gas that
Okay.
is put into his
His
vehicle is paid for by his account. You would
Okay.
not ask for reimbursement. You would use his
Mhm.
ATM, his debit card,
Got it,
his
got it. Perfect.
whatever, and
Thank
you
you.
would pay for gas.
Yeah,
Now,
we've never done that. We're just trying to figure this out.
no, you would. That's absolutely justified. Now, that does not mean, and please use reasonableness, that doesn't mean that you fill up his tank and you guys decide, just you and your husband, to go on a long drive somewhere just to use his gas and not your own. And no, that, and then really, and in fact, I've had it. I had a conservatee who tried convincing the court that almost every single day he was putting $50 or $60 in a gas tank. And I even myself trying to help him out go, where the hell did you go every day that you have to put $60 every day? And I'll tell you, I know he's not taking the conservatee with him on every one of the, I was concerned, like, dude, really? That looks suspicious as all get go. And I'm telling you, if it looks suspicious to me, it absolutely will look suspicious to the court, because I'm not scrutinizing it the way they would. What they're looking for is making sure you are not spending the conservatives' money on enriching your own life, because
Right.
what they consider is you have the means to go make your own money. They don't have those same opportunities to make that type of money. So whatever money they get is golden, right? And it has to
Absolutely.
last them for a very long time. And
Right.
they have expenses that are far beyond the expenses an everyday person has. And they shouldn't be, their life should not have to go without those very
Right.
important things, because you've spent their money on going to
Oh, no, I
Ruth
understand.
Crisp for a steak dinner, right? So
Right.
just keep that in
No.
mind.
Yeah,
That's
no, we don't. We keep everything very separate. We don't charge them room and board. We don't charge for food. We haven't charged for gas yet. I think I was thinking more in the future when his cousin takes over and she manages things,
sure.
what I can give her in reference as allowable expenses.
No, and I really would start the gas now, hun. Keep in mind how very odd it looks for the cousin or whatever that you haven't charged gas all this time, but then she gets it and she's charging gas, and how somebody could look at that and go, how come the prior person never charged gas and now all of a sudden you come in and you're charging gas? It may make it look a little odd for her. So really, to make it a smooth transition, you want to maintain and give her guiding, so like she can look at your accounting and go, okay, she spent approximately this amount a week on gas, so that's what he goes through. Okay, she spent this amount on, let's say, clothing. And let me say, as far as food goes, say for instance, he's on a special diet, or he's doing supplements, or say you meal replacements and stuff like that you and your husband would not eat or need. Those items need to be charged to him, so that if somebody else has to take over an emergency, they know and have those items. So really do be conscious about that. I know you as loving parents are trying to save for him or whatever, but it really doesn't help somebody who has to take over when you're not here to understand and follow your footsteps. Okay, so we're going to continue on. So in this case, this conservator charged 150 hours, and he's only requesting $500. I know that seems low, but believe it or not, the conservatee is his mother, and he feels, hey, it's my mother. I'm not going to really charge her, so I'm not going to. And so he's just gonna take a little bit for his time, and he decides $500. I'm actually looking, Rex, I don't know why he missed my papers, but anyway, there is a local court rule for every court. I can tell you Contra Costa County, which is the one I have, their local rule is 7.450, or I believe it is, or it used to be. And on there you will find what the 2021 on there, you will find what the fees are or the rates are that you can legally charge for the conservatorship assistance you're giving. So if you were a fiduciary or somebody is in my capacity, I could charge a whole lot more than somebody who was doing pro per. But the hourly rate for somebody who is doing pro per is 75 per hour. Now, that doesn't mean you bankrupt your conservatee and take all his money because of your fees. That's not what it's for. But say, for instance, a cousin who this is a friend and she's really, really going above and beyond, you kind of want to compensate her because taking care of somebody like that, she may have to quit her job or, and you want to give them a little something to actually live on also. So you will see on the local court rule changed. So on the new one on 2021, which is the last time they updated it, it was local court rule 7.426. And so you will look under the fiduciary rate. It also talks about travel time. So you can look up that also. Anyway, in this case, they're requesting $500. He's also stating that he paid an attorney. So an attorney really would be filling this out, not him, but Jared. And Jared's turning in an invoice and requesting $3,500. That attorney also, due to it being a conservatorship, has to follow the local court rules. So say, for instance, if that attorney charges $500 an hour, let's say regular rate or regular fees, and there is a conservatorship, if that attorney has only been in practice for less than 5 years, the most that attorney can charge per hour is $350. So they're limited on their rate also.
So is there a way to contest the previous fee of an attorney in that case?
It would be too late now, hun.
Okay,
Once the court approves something,
it's
there's
done.
no
Yeah, that's what I
contesting it.
thought. That's okay.
That's why you want to do it before the court agrees or signs off on it. Okay.
That's why we're doing this now. We didn't know.
Okay, you also must state about veteran benefits. This is not something you can leave off. You have to, this would be important for you, hun, whether they're veteran benefits or any other type of military benefits. You will want to indicate that.
So his only benefit as from me as a veteran is nothing, but from his father as a retiree is his ability to buy into cheaper insurance.
Okay, but you also stated that if something should happen to you, then they want their money back and blah, blah, blah. You should indicate.
Oh, so we list that information here. Gotcha. Thank you.
That's why I said whether you use the word veterans benefits or you use a different type of titling, you would want to put here that what has to be repaid or what the agreement you have with the military or agreement you have with a state agency or somebody else. Or maybe you don't even call it an agreement because you don't agree to it.
We
But
don't
you're
agree, we didn't have a choice, but.
right. You didn't have a choice. But again, I would state that all here.
Okay,
Okay,
yeah, there's
next is
actually a letter with that. Yeah, thank you.
also in hun, you do, if you need to attach something that you wish like that, I myself would at the end of this sentence put see exhibit A if it was the first one, see exhibit B if it was the second one. And so you don't just attach a document without somewhere in a petition indicating what that document is, right? So I would say see exhibit A, and then I'll have a cover page at the end, which I don't think there's one here, but I'll show you the end. I'll have a cover page that only says exhibit A, and then I will attach that document on underneath that and let the judge decides whether he wants to go read that letter or not by saying where it is. Okay, next thing, state hospital. And hun, once you have really put it in there one time, that doesn't mean your next accountings you have to do, you keep adding that same information. I think the next time I wouldn't put a copy, I would just say, the military is still requesting that this be paid or that be done or blah, 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 and not attach it a second time because the court does have it under the first filing. So don't reattach your stuff. Okay, state hospital. This must be on here. You need to state if they were an inpatient at a state hospital. The reason being, well, there's probably several reasons for that, but I think mostly it's for that if there's a state hospital, there's other things going on that the court may not have jurisdiction over, or there's could be something else that it's going on that the court needs to be aware. Say not mentally incompetent, but say there's some type of issues, the court needs to be aware of why you're in a state hospital. Okay, conservatee's address. Typically, I don't put this in my petitions. You can if you want to. I just really don't feel that you need to know a little bit of that. Most places, though, in this case, it's a care home, so no one can just walk in and go, hi, I want to see Susie. No, they wouldn't allow that. But so maybe I would just put the name of the convalescent home, because then people could look it up and get that information. But say, for instance, maybe the conservatee is living at home or alone, I mean, or maybe they're living in a studio that's maybe on the you just don't want people saying, okay, conservatee, which means they possibly have a disability and I know they're home, so maybe I can go bother them, or maybe I can go get something for them because they couldn't really fight me back anyway, or, you know, whatever. It's, I don't mean to say this, but sometimes it's a creepy world and I just don't like giving that information, but I would put if it was a care home. Otherwise, I just put conservatee lives at the same address as indicated on the petition or something like that. When you put words like that, the courts know what you're trying to do. They know you're protecting the identity. You're not trying to be, let's say, sneaky, or not trying to tell people where this person is. You're just protecting their privacy because they are allowed the same privacy that you are. Count statements, I don't know if Rex went through this with you, but you are going to put, I'm not attaching them to this petition, but I do have a separate cover letter. Remember, original, and I'm talking original bank statements must be submitted to the court. So if you have online banking or paperless banking, I'd change it if I was you. Otherwise, the only thing that you can do is when you're doing your accounting and ready to turn it in, you have to go to the bank and you have to ask them to print the bank statements, and they have to certify them, which means stamp them with some type of bank stamp that says they're original. Otherwise, the courts will not accept them. And I've had a few people do this. Some banks charge a very hefty sum to print that for you. My suggestion is take off the wireless, paperless banking, make them send you a statement every single month, because you must turn it in, and it cannot be something you print off an internet version. The courts can tell if it's printed or if it's an original. If it is printed, there's no way for the court to verify you have not manipulated that statement into your benefit. So originals must be turned in, but not attached here. I'll go through the cover page.
So
Okay.
we were told that conservatorship accounts cannot be electronic banking. None of Garrett's accounts have ever been allowed to be electronic banking.
Oh.
We used to bank at Wells Fargo. We now exclusively use Travis Credit Union.
Uh-huh.
And both banks have told us that. I have a business account at Bank of America and was checking in to the fees and different things there, and they told me the same thing.
That's interesting, because I have probably 3 clients who bank at Travis also, and they have online banking. No, I'm sorry, not online banking, but they don't get bank statements. And
you can't get the bank statements electronically. They'll send you what they consider a monthly or quarterly summary through the email, but they will not give you anything related to a conservatorship account. They won't let me have a checking for him. He only has a savings, and his investment accounts also had to be paper form.
Right. And because I was saying I just completed an accounting for somebody at Travis, and actually he had to go into the bank and then tell the banker my email address, and the banker ended up emailing me the bank statements for the accounting. So yeah, it's just something you're gonna have to go through, hon.
It's fine, and I don't mind. They say it's to cut down on fiduciary abuse, and I get that, but I don't, because people are the way they are nowadays. If somebody wanted to steal from a family member or somebody they were responsible for, they'd find a way to do it.
Right?
I'm a retired social worker, so I know this.
Right? Oh,
Right.
I can't tell you the stories I know myself, but yes, I hear you with it. But I think the courts are trying to do, and the banks are trying to do their share of trying to help and get away from it. But you're right, they'll find other ways. So again, we're going to move on. Capital changes. You're going to state whether there were any capital changes. You're going to state if there were any liabilities, whether they were paid for or not. This one is very important. Also, request for special notice. A lot of people don't know what that means. What it does mean is, say for instance, I am a friend of the conservatee and I just want to make sure because maybe I think the parents are a little shady. I don't know. Or they're just doing something. What I can do is pay the courts $40, and that is $40 for the, I think, the lifetime of the conservatorship, but I pay $40, and every single time you file a document with the court, you must send me a copy of that filing. That's what it means. A lot of times you will get, especially if you're doing a decedent's estate, you will get requests for special notices because we have those lovely, I call them sharks, but inheritance advance lenders, sharks. They'll put a request for special notice on a decedent's estate because they want to know every single thing that's happening because they're looking for their money. It's terrible. But so again, you want to tell the court whether, and you will receive a copy of that request for special notice. So you'll say ahead of time, but you'll want to tell the court whether you've received any request for special notice or not. Most of the time it's no, but there are several cases. Okay, we're getting to the bottom. You as a conservator are praying. What are you praying? You're praying that your account is approved and settled. You're praying that the court deems all acts of the conservator approved. I'm specifically asking for the approval and confirmation that the court approves I sold the automobile. Really what the importance of having the court confirm and approve the sale is, say for instance, I went this far, say for instance, a year or two goes by and a beneficiary maybe wasn't paying attention much to what was going on during the time period, and he gets a copy of this. I'm a beneficiary, let's just say, or no, I'm the conservator. My brother or somebody, I don't even have one, but gets a copy of it, and so he's a beneficiary, and he gets a copy of this. Once the court approves and settles and confirms what I've done, no one can sue for that. And so my brother couldn't come back 3 years later and go, oh heck no, you sold that to your friend and you sold it to a friend for nothing, and then somehow you're end up driving it now, or whatever the case may be, and has a fit. They can't do anything because they didn't bring the objection before the court approved it, and the court had no reason to believe. And so to get it overturned is just so much harder. But basically, most people want the confirmation and approval of the court because it somewhat cuts off the liability. Okay, same thing with this. There was furniture and fixtures. Okay, you approve my selling of the furniture and fixtures. I'm also asking to pay myself the $500 I think I deserve. Sorry. I'm asking to pay the attorney because I think he deserves it. Again, if you don't have an attorney, don't put this in here. You leave that part out. Only put in what pertains to your petition. If you never sold furniture, don't put it in, right? No automobile, same thing. At the end, you always leave one that says, and the court may grant anything further they feel is just and proper. The date you will leave, well, that's your date, so you will sign. Put you as the conservator, sign. This would be left off because there's no attorney. And there's one last page, the verification. So I can't tell you how many times ProPers and other people will write to me and go, Tamara, I just don't understand these examiner notes. They state need a verified deck. Really, that's all it says. And you're going, what in the earth does that mean? Well, I can tell you what that means. It means this page right here before you. It's a verified declaration. They call it a deck, but it's short for declaration. And all it's saying is you're declaring under penalty of perjury that is true and correct. You cannot turn in any petition that doesn't have a verification, even if you're the one that's completing the petition. Okay, this verification is very important. You must have it on there. Otherwise, they're going to bounce you out and say, until we get this little page right here, we're not even looking at your file. It's stating that you, the conservator of the person in the estate, have turned in what? Your first account. So usually I repeat the entire title on the petition. And I believe it to be true. It contains a full statement of all the charges and all the credits. That means all the payments out, all the receipts in during the specific accounting period. And I declare that the information I provided is true and correct under penalty of perjury. And I'm going to date it and I'm going to sign my name. Very important page. So now in this case, what would happen is if you had any exhibits, remember I was talking about exhibits, you want to turn in something to the court to show them. What I would do is take a blank plead, see the pleading paper, right? Nothing up here. And I always go, this is just me, you can do whatever line you want. I go down to line 25, I center it. And in big, bold letters, usually I use the font type of probably about 26 or 30. And I will put all caps, Exhibit A. And that's the only thing that will be on this page. And then I follow that by putting a copy of what I want or I stated was the Exhibit A behind it. And that's how I turn it in. Remember, you can never, like, say for instance, you wanted the court to have that paper of yours, but you didn't know how to get it in the court's hands. You can't just walk in the court and go, here, I want the court to see this paper, because nobody knows what that paper is, how to file that, how to put anything. No, you need to have it as part of an attachment and indicate what it is. So again, putting it as Exhibit A, Exhibit B, whatever your exhibit you indicated up above it is, put it here, attach it, and you're good. Here is an example, is just part of the examples, how you would submit your original bank statements. It's totally separate than the petition. You just get a blank pleading paper. Again, put your own data up here. You put the case number, make sure the case number so they know. And basically you're saying these are the original bank statements for the first account that I turned in. And down here it just says original bank statements, so nothing else. The court knows, and why do they do this? The court knows that if you've attached your bank statements behind this document, the document is considered confidential. And so the court automatically posts it as confidential. So that means if you can, if you're able to look at documents online, or like if you go to Alameda, I can look at any document that's filed just by clicking the document and saying I want to see it, right? With bank statements and things of that nature, the court marks them confidential, so nobody can review them except for a court clerk.
Because of the type of account that Garrett has, he is not issued an debit card with like a Visa or MasterCard symbol on it. It is only an ATM card. I cannot use it at a store or with an organization. So what I do two things. One is if they'll wait, I pay them with a cashier's check directly from the credit union to the agency or organization. But for things that I have to purchase for him, I keep those receipts and reimburse myself from his account.
Okay, you could not reimburse yourself technically until you got approval to do so. They're very strict about the conservatee receiving, conservator receiving money from the conservatee. And so if so what you would have to do is collect your receipts the whole year.
Yep.
Turn them into the court explaining what you paid, how much they are, and wait until the court says you can reimburse yourself.
Okay, we will,
Now,
yeah, our other attorney
I'm-
didn't say that. And you're giving me much more information, so I'm trying to make sure when we do it ourselves that we do it the way you guys recommend.
Well, you may do it wrong a first time and the courts will tell you what you did wrong and what you may not do in the future.
Okay.
Let
got
me
it.
say, you're gonna,
Yeah.
it'll be a tiny little hand spank, but you'll
that's
get
fine.
it loud and clear. But they're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
going to jail you or take the conservatorship
right. No,
away
no,
or
no.
anything
No,
like
right,
that.
right.
But you have to be very careful. I myself would try and figure out how or why the bank does not give a debit card, because I have very many conservatorships and they all have debit cards. And
But
even
Travis.
from Travis.
Interesting. I will go back. They have a new manager there now. So I will go back and speak to her. I
Now
know her
I'm not
quite well.
sure which one. The one I think they
We're,
use
we're
is
on base.
oh,
We're on
the one
base.
they use is in Antioch, I think, or
Yeah. So
somewhere.
I will find out. Yeah, thank
But
you.
they have a debit card.
Okay.
And if not, you may want to see about opening another account somewhere else that would allow you that debit card, because there's so many times that they really should be able to use it. And
It's incredibly inconvenient.
I bet, like I'm
We-
sitting here
G-
going, my God.
Garrett is incontinent. He uses diapers, pull-ups, liners, wipes, all that stuff. And we had been using a company in the Midwest, but during the pandemic, shipping became so erratic that we couldn't get hygiene items for him on a needed basis. So we began to purchase them on Amazon.
Right.
Because we knew Amazon, we know
Right.
where the warehouse is, it comes right to our house. He's not without a diaper. I don't want to use cloth diapers like I did when he was a baby.
Oh.
Not my cup of tea, especially with an adult in their 30s. So those are the reimbursements we have.
Right.
Would be
And,
so those we wait, but that's why I will check with them about getting a debit card or opening a separate account.
There's no reason why you should not be able to have that debit card.
Okay.
Again, a bank cannot determine what a court would of maybe you shouldn't have access to that debit card because you're wasting it on your own funds. But if that was the case, they wouldn't stop the debit card. They would take away the conservatorship of the estate away from you, and somebody else would handle the money. So there's no reason not to have a debit card. Okay, so that is it. That is all of that we are teaching. I went way over. I thank you for staying with me.
No, thank you. And I apologize. I have to step away because my son's nurse is at the door for his afternoon shift and she doesn't have her key.
So, right, we're done. You can log off. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a
You're
wonderful
welcome.
day.
You too. Okay, bye-bye, everyone.